My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and until that Thursday night, I believe stability wasn't something you stumbled into. It was something you built, carefully, quietly, without leaving cracks that could collapse later. That belief shaped everything: my work, my routines, my relationships, especially my judgment. Or at least, I thought it did. If I had $1 for every time my boyfriend Daniel called me steady, I probably could have paid off my condo twice over. Instead, I was the one covering nearly everything in our life, because stability, to me, meant carrying more when the person you loved needed time to figure things out. Daniel was 30, charming in a way that didn't demand attention, but somehow always received it anyway. When we met, that charm felt grounding, soft, easy. Now looking back, I think it was something else. Something that knew how to avoid responsibility. Daniel was the kind of person people called fun when they meant exhausting. At first, that energy pulled me in. He could turn a boring Tuesday into rooftop drinks, a random Saturday into a last-minute road trip, a quiet dinner into candles, playlists, outfit changes, and something that felt like a scene from a movie. But after about a year, I started noticing something underneath it. Everything had to be a moment, a performance. If I disagreed with him, it became a speech. If I asked for a heads up before he invited people over, it became control. If I wanted one quiet night at home, suddenly I was killing the vibe. And then there were the threats. Not full breakups, just strategic ones. Maybe I should just go. Maybe you'd be happier alone. Maybe we need space since you're so impossible lately. At first, I treated those words like drama. Eventually, I started hearing them as information. The final blow-up happened on a Friday night over something that sounded small, but wasn't. I got home from work around 6:30 and immediately knew something was off. There were 2 air mattresses in my living room, not deflated, not stored, set up, prepared, like guests were already expected. I checked my phone, a group text from Daniel. Him, his sister, her boyfriend. 6 nights. They were apartment hunting, and apparently staying here. I stood there for a second, staring at the air mattresses. Then I looked at him. You invited 2 people to live here for a week and didn't mention it? He didn't even hesitate. They're my family, Naomi. I let out a slow breath. That doesn't answer the question. He rolled his eyes immediately. Why do you make everything difficult? I almost laughed at that. It's not difficult to ask before volunteering my home. That was it. The switch flipped. Suddenly I was selfish, cold, too rigid, impossible to build a life with. He started pacing the kitchen, talking faster, louder, like if he stacked enough words on top of each other, they would turn into logic. I stayed calm, which he hated, because calm doesn't give chaos anything to push against. Finally, he grabbed his jacket and his keys. I'm going to Mia's, he said, already halfway to the door. I need a break from your energy. I looked at him. Okay. That word landed wrong. He paused, turned slightly, like he expected something else. What, that's it? He asked. I shrugged. You said you needed space. He stared at me for a second longer, like he was waiting for me to chase him, to argue, to pull him back into the performance. I didn't. He left at 8:17. I remember because I checked the doorbell app to make sure the garage closed. At 9:04, my phone buzzed. You really don't care if I leave. I stared at the message for a moment before replying. I care, I just won't beg. No response. At 10:31, another message. Maybe take the weekend and think about how you treat people. That one I didn't answer. I took a shower, watched half a show, went to bed. Saturday morning around 8:40, I sent one message. Let me know when you want to pick up what you need. We should probably take some space. Simple, clean, no drama. At 8:52, he sent the message that ended everything. We're not done until I say we're done. I read it once. Then again, and something in me just stopped. Not anger, not hurt. Stillness. Final. I typed back. Good thing you don't get a vote. Then I put my phone down, and I started packing. Not angry packing. Not chaotic. Finished packing. His shoes into boxes, jackets into garment bags, toiletries into a plastic bin. I wrapped his expensive watch in a soft cloth so he couldn't later say I scratched it. I coiled his chargers neatly, labeled them, separated what he had bought from what had always been mine. By 11:30, everything was ready. 7 boxes, 2 bags, 1 laundry basket full of things he insisted we needed. At noon, I called a locksmith. Changed the locks. Not because I was afraid. Because I was done negotiating. At 12:14, my phone lit up. Daniel calling. Once. Twice. 8 times. Then the text started. Are you serious? Open the door. You always do this. I'm coming over right now. You don't get to decide this alone. I replied once. Pickup window is 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Bring whoever you want. I'll have your things ready. At 1:57, he showed up with his sister and enough attitude to fill the entire hallway. I was already outside my condo door, boxes stacked neatly behind me. He looked at them, then at me, and laughed. Wow, you packed me up like I died. I met his eyes. No, I packed you up like you moved out. His sister, Paige, stepped in with that careful, fake reasonable tone people use when they already know they are standing beside the person who caused the problem. Naomi, come on. He was upset. You both said things. I looked at her, then back at Daniel. I didn't text him that he got to decide whether I was allowed to end a relationship. He texted me that. Paige glanced at him, just for a second. Small, quick, but I saw it. Daniel crossed his arms, jaw tight. You know what I meant. I held his stare. I actually don't. That was the moment he changed. You could almost feel it. The shift from offended to theatrical. His voice got louder. His hands started moving. He angled his body just enough to make sure anyone coming down the hallway would hear the right parts and miss the rest. So this is it, he said, with that bright, wounded disbelief he used when he wanted to look like the one being abandoned. After 2 years, you're just throwing me out because I needed one night away? I didn't raise my voice. I'm ending it because you treat every disagreement like a hostage negotiation. His face hardened. He took one step closer and lowered his voice, suddenly intimate, suddenly sharp. You are not doing this to me. I didn't move. It's already done. For a second, he just stared at me, waiting, watching, like he still believed there had to be another layer beneath my calm, a real scene, a breakdown, tears, something he could use. When it didn't come, he kicked one of the boxes, not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to make a point. Paige hissed his name under her breath, embarrassed now. Daniel looked at me and started listing the usual charges. Heartless, cold, immature, insane. Like if he said enough ugly things quickly enough, one of them would finally crack me open. I told him his winter jackets were in the tall box, and his blender was packed separately so it wouldn't get damaged. That made him angrier, because chaos hates organization. It hates labels and tape and clean endings. They loaded everything in 2 trips. On the second trip, Paige stayed by the elevator, and Daniel came back alone. He stood in front of me, empty-handed now, eyes dark in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. You always act like calm means right. There it was, the thing that had bothered him most about me from the beginning. Not that I argued, that I didn't perform my emotions in a way he could control. I said, no, calm just means I'm done arguing with what's obvious. His mouth tightened. For one strange second, he looked like he wanted to do 3 different things at once. Yell, cry, kiss me. He chose none of them. He just turned and walked away. I thought that would be the ugliest part. I was wrong. By Monday, Daniel had turned our breakup into a publicity campaign. First came the messengers. Mia texted me that I had embarrassed him and should at least meet him for coffee because closure mattered. Then his cousin Mason messaged me on Instagram saying real women didn't throw men out over one fight. Then Paige called me from a number I didn't know and said Daniel was spiraling and I needed to stop being stubborn. That word almost made me laugh. Stubborn. As if refusing to be manipulated were a personality flaw. I sent Paige one screenshot. Just one. The exact text. We're not done until I say we're done. Good thing you don't get a vote. She went quiet. Not performative quiet. Real quiet. The kind that arrives when a version of the story collapses in real time. After a few seconds, she said softly, I didn't know he sent that. I leaned back against my kitchen counter and looked around the condo. My condo, my name on the mortgage, my dishes in the cabinets, my silence finally settling back into the walls. Most people don't tell the whole story, I said, when the whole story makes them look ridiculous. Paige didn't defend him. She didn't argue. She just said she'd talk to him. Then social media started. Daniel posted vague captions first. Little polished lines about betrayal, cruelty, abandonment, stories about surviving emotional manipulation, about being discarded without warning. One of them said, some people weaponize housing when they can't control you. That one was especially interesting. He had a car, a salary, a friend's guest room, and enough luggage to survive a minor evacuation when he left my building. A mutual friend named Chloe sent me screenshots with one message underneath. This feels selective. I wrote back, that's a polite word for it. By Wednesday, he had moved from posting to performing. My office called down from reception around 10:20 and said a man had dropped off banana bread and an envelope for me. I hadn't ordered anything. I went downstairs. The bag was sitting on the counter like something harmless. Domestic, sweet, innocent. Reception handed me the card. You know this isn't really us. Call me. No name. No signature. Didn't need one. The handwriting had that deliberate softness Daniel used when he wanted to look more wounded than manipulative. I took a photo of the bag, another of the envelope. Then I told reception that if Daniel showed up again, he wasn't to be let upstairs. The office manager, Denise, came out of her office when she heard enough of the conversation to understand the shape of it. Everything okay? She asked. She had the kind of face that had probably seen a lot of workplace crises over the years and knew exactly when not to ask too much. Yes, I said, but I'm documenting unwanted contact. She nodded once, immediately understanding the seriousness under the calm. Understood. That evening, I got home and found him in my condo lobby, not upstairs. In the lobby, thank God. He was standing there with an overnight bag and that same injured expression he kept using lately, the one designed to make other people feel cruel for having boundaries. Behind the front desk, Noel, the building manager, looked exhausted already. Daniel turned the second he saw me, and his whole face changed into wounded relief, like he had been waiting for me all day. I just need 10 minutes, he said, to get the rest of my things and talk like adults. Noel looked at me. He said he still lives here. I didn't answer right away. I just pulled out my phone, opened the text thread, and handed it to Noel. Then I showed him the building registration with only my name on it. Noel read the screen, blinked once, and handed the phone back. He's not going upstairs. Daniel turned so fast it was almost impressive. This is between me and Naomi. Noel didn't even flinch. Not in my lobby, it isn't. That was the first moment in days I almost smiled. Daniel pushed harder after that. Said I owed him furniture money. Said half the decor was his. Said he had mail delivered there. Said I couldn't just erase him because I was emotional. I looked at him and said, this isn't emotion, it's paperwork. Noel actually laughed. Tried to hide it. Didn't quite make it. Daniel heard it too, and I watched the humiliation flash across his face before it turned into anger. He set the overnight bag on the floor beside the lobby couch and said he'd wait me out. I said, Daniel, I'm not doing this. He stepped closer, dropping his voice again. You can't erase me because you're in a mood. There was something eerie about how quickly he could switch registers. Public victim, private threat, wounded ex, indignant partner. He rotated through them like outfits. I held his gaze. This isn't a mood. For a second, I thought he might keep going. Might push further. Might force the scene he'd been trying to create since Saturday. Instead, he threatened to come back with police. Then he left. He did not come back with police. Probably because police ask questions. And questions are dangerous when your story depends on volume instead of facts. When I finally got upstairs, shut the door behind me, and stood in the quiet kitchen, I realized my hands were shaking. Not because I missed him, not because I doubted myself. Because even when you don't participate in chaos, it still leaves residue. It still gets in your body. Thursday, I booked a consultation with an attorney. $300 for an hour. Best $300 I spent all year. He told me to keep everything. Screenshots, gifts, notes, reception records, lobby incident, all of it. He said if the contact continued, a cease and desist would be smart before things got uglier. Things got uglier fast. That Saturday, Daniel used a delivery app to send cookies to my condo. Under the tape on the box was a folded note. Still yours. Stop being dramatic. I stood in my kitchen looking at those words for a long moment, the cardboard warm from the delivery bag, the smell of sugar rising into the air like something normal, something kind, something meant to blur the edges of what this really was. Then I took pictures, threw the cookies in the trash, and emailed the attorney. He sent the cease and desist that Monday. It cost me $425. For exactly 36 hours, I let myself think maybe that would be enough. It wasn't. The cease and desist didn't calm Daniel down. It insulted him. You could almost track the escalation like a pattern. Predictable. Structured in its own twisted way. When emotions stopped working, he pivoted to control. When control slipped, he escalated. First, he went financial. A Venmo request popped up on my phone late Monday night. $1,280. The note read, shared rent reimbursement and emotional damages. I stared at it for a long second, then let out a quiet breath. Rent reimbursement. In 2 years, Daniel had never paid rent. Not once. He covered groceries occasionally, paid the internet bill one time, then reminded people about it like it was a mortgage contribution. I declined the request. Typed one word. No. Then I blocked the account. For a few hours, it was quiet. Then came the digital phase. New numbers, burner emails, messages that weren't quite threats but weren't harmless either. little comments that tried to sound casual but landed wrong. And then the emojis. A brand new social account started commenting under an old photo from a work fundraiser. Snake emojis, repeated, quiet, petty. I blocked that too. No response, no engagement, just silence. Because silence, I was learning, was the only thing that didn't feed him. Then it got strange. The first time, I almost convinced myself it was coincidence. I stopped at a grocery store near Dublin after work, still in my office clothes, just planning to grab a few things before heading home. I was halfway down the frozen aisle when I saw him. Daniel, standing at the far end, looking at me. Not surprised. Not really. Just there. I felt something in my chest tighten. Not panic yet, but awareness. A shift, like the air had changed without warning. I didn't approach him. Didn't speak. I grabbed what I needed, kept my movements controlled, steady, like nothing was wrong. Then I left. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Blue looks good on you. I stopped walking. Looked down at myself. Blue blouse. Same one I had worn to the office all day. That was the moment everything changed categories. Annoying became deliberate. Emotional became intentional. I took a screenshot. The next morning, I filed a police report. A week later, a message came from someone unexpected. Her name was Tracy. She said she had recently started seeing Daniel, and that something about his story didn't add up. Even reading the message, I felt a strange kind of clarity settle in. Even his new relationship couldn't hold the version of reality he was selling. I didn't send Tracy everything. Just 3 screenshots. The original text. The lobby note. Blue looks good on you. A few minutes later, Tracy replied. Yeah, I'm out. I stared at the message for a second, then set my phone down. Unexpected ally. Unexpected confirmation. The pattern wasn't just visible to me anymore. Then came the gym. I boxed 3 mornings a week before work. Nothing intense. Just enough to clear my head. Routine, structure, something that belonged to me. Ethan from my office, actually, had started going too. We'd grabbed coffee once after class. That was it. Simple. Normal. Safe. Apparently, Daniel knew. That Thursday morning, Ethan and I walked out of the gym together, still talking about whether the office softball team was worth joining. I saw Daniel before I'd processed him, standing beside my car, like he had always been there, like he belonged there. No warning, no message, just presence. Ethan slowed immediately. I could feel the shift in him without looking. Do you want me to go back inside? He asked quietly. I shook my head. No, stay. Daniel smiled. That bright, polished smile people use right before they do something ugly in public. So that's it, he said, looking between us. You replaced me with a coworker, and now I'm the villain. I didn't even react to that part. You showed up at my gym. That was the only sentence that mattered. He ignored it completely. Instead, he turned to Ethan like they were meeting at a mutual friend's party. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, he said smoothly. She moves on fast when she's trying to punish someone. Ethan looked at me. I didn't raise my voice. He's been told not to contact me. That should have ended it. Daniel stepped closer. Too close. His voice dropped. If I can't fix this, he said, eyes locked on mine, I can absolutely ruin the next thing too. Clean. Clear. No confusion. No performance. Just a statement. Ethan stiffened beside me. I didn't move. Didn't react. But inside, something settled into place. Because threats once spoken out loud stop being abstract. They become evidence. The gym manager must have heard enough, because he came out a few seconds later. 2 other members followed behind him, drawn by the shift in energy. And just like that, Daniel changed again. The tears came. The voice cracked. Suddenly he was the one being misunderstood. The one being twisted. The one who just wanted to talk. But the words had already been spoken, and witnesses had heard them. Tears don't erase clarity. I turned to the manager. Would you be willing to write down what you heard? He nodded. Yes. That afternoon, I went back to my attorney, paid another filing fee, started the process for a civil protection order. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel reactive. I felt aligned. Like everything that had been chaotic before was finally organizing itself into something clear, something structured, something that could be handled. The strangest part of that week wasn't Daniel. It was his mother. Her name was Linda. We had never been close, but she had always been polite, quiet, observant in a way that suggested she noticed more than she said. She called me Sunday afternoon. No small talk. No preamble. I don't want details, she said. I just want the truth. So I gave it to her. The short version. Then I forwarded 3 screenshots. I waited for the defense. The excuses. The request for grace. It didn't come. Instead, there was a long silence. Then a sigh. Heavy. Tired. I raised a son, she said slowly, not a storm. I closed my eyes for a second, surprised by the weight of that sentence. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say at first. So I said the only honest thing. Thank you. She told me she would handle what she could. It didn't stop the hearing, but it did something else. It confirmed that I wasn't imagining this, that this wasn't just a messy breakup. This was something else, something that didn't resolve with conversation, something that needed distance and documentation and boundaries that weren't negotiable. Because nobody who respects you follows you through grocery aisles. Nobody who loves you threatens the next person standing beside you. The hearing was scheduled 5 weeks after the text that ended everything. 5 weeks. That was all it took for something that used to feel like a relationship to turn into a case file. I arrived early. Not because I was nervous, because I wanted time to sit in the quiet before everything became structured and formal and recorded. Daniel arrived 10 minutes later. Navy shirt, clean lines, soft expression. The kind of version of himself he wore when he wanted to look reasonable. Like Chaos had learned how to dress for court. His attorney walked beside him. Polished, composed, expensive. The kind of person who could turn emotion into language that sounded acceptable. I didn't look away when he saw me. He did. Just for a second. Then the performance reset. Inside the courtroom, everything slowed down. There was no music, no raised voices, no dramatic pacing. Just facts. Or at least, that's what it was supposed to be. I sat down, placed my folder on the table, and opened it just enough to see the edges of everything inside. Screenshots, call logs, photos, printed messages, the police report, the gym manager's statement, emails from my office documenting unwanted contact. Paper has a kind of quiet authority. It doesn't care who cries harder. It doesn't react. It just stays. Daniel's attorney spoke first, framed everything exactly the way I expected. A difficult breakup, she said. Emotions running high, miscommunication. My client was seeking closure. There was confusion regarding residence, shared property, and communication boundaries. I didn't interrupt, didn't react, because I had already learned something important. Chaos depends on reaction. Structure depends on patience. The judge was an older man, calm in a way that didn't feel performative, just uninterested in nonsense. He flipped through the file slowly, page by page. No expression, no commentary, just reading. Then he stopped, picked up one sheet, and read it out loud. We're not done until I say we're done. The room went quiet. He lowered the paper slightly and looked over his glasses at Daniel. That is not confusion, he said. That is control. Daniel's attorney shifted slightly, adjusting her tone. The subsequent contact, Your Honor, was driven by emotional distress, not intent to threaten. The judge didn't let her finish. He picked up another page. The gym statement. If I can't fix this, I can absolutely ruin the next thing too. Then another. Blue looks good on you. He placed the papers down, looked directly at Daniel. After being told not to contact her, why were you observing her clothing in public and appearing at her gym? Daniel's composure cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough. His eyes filled. His voice softened. I was heartbroken, he said. I made mistakes. I didn't think she would cut me off like that after 2 years. I just wanted to talk. The words were almost convincing. If you didn't know the pattern, if you hadn't lived inside it. The judge didn't react to the emotion. Heartbreak, he said calmly, does not create access. That sentence landed harder than anything else that morning. Clean. Final. True. The order was granted. 1 year. No contact. 300 feet from my condo, my office, my gym. No third-party contact. No social media. No gifts. No accidental appearances. Just distance. Real enforceable distance. When it was over, I stepped out into the hallway and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. And that's when I saw Linda. She was sitting on a bench, hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than I remembered. Daniel walked past her with his attorney without stopping. She watched him go. Then she stood when she saw me. In her hands was a small tote bag. His last things, she said gently. He left them at my house. I took the bag. Inside, winter scarf, a coffee mug, 2 books, ordinary things. Leftover pieces of something that had already ended. You don't need to keep storing his life for him, she added. I nodded. Thank you. She studied me for a moment, then said something that stayed with me, longer than the court order. For what it's worth, you were the calmest person in all of this. I thought about that. About the nights I had stood in my kitchen, hands shaking. About the moments I had wanted to respond, explain, argue, fix. Calm hadn't come naturally. It had come from a decision. I think calm gets easier, I said, when you stop negotiating with chaos. She nodded, like she understood more than she said. That afternoon, I went home. My home. Set the tote bag on the counter. Put the books in a donation box. Left the mug by the sink. And stood there for a moment listening. No messages. No footsteps in the hallway. No performance waiting to restart. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't feel empty. The kind that feels earned. Since then, life has become something I used to underestimate. Peaceful. I got promoted to senior project manager in February. Better pay, better team, more responsibility, but the kind I choose. I kept going to boxing. Kept my mornings structured, my evenings calm. And slowly, carefully, I started seeing someone. Ethan. We didn't rush it. No intensity disguised as connection. No chaos mistaken for passion. Just consistency. He texts when he says he will. Shows up when he plans to. Doesn't treat basic respect like it's a negotiation. It's amazing how different love feels when it doesn't come with instability attached. As for Daniel, the little I've heard came through people trying not to gossip while absolutely gossiping. He stayed with Linda for a while. A few friends stopped sharing his posts once the timeline started making its way around. The truth has a way of doing that. It doesn't shout. It just stays consistent. And consistency is hard to argue with. The biggest thing I learned from all of this is simple. Chaos survives on negotiation. On one more conversation, one more explanation, one more chance to fix something that was never meant to be fixed. But some people don't want clarity. They want access. They want the ability to step in and out of your life whenever their emotions spike and call it love, because that sounds better than control. Daniel didn't lose me because of one text. He lost me because that text revealed what he believed love was, something he could define. Pause. Resume. Own. And the moment I answered like I had equal authority over my own life, he unraveled. That unraveling wasn't romance. It wasn't heartbreak. It was entitlement. And the truth is, the relationship ended the moment I stopped confusing chaos with passion. My name is Bianca Russo. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a mechanical engineer for a manufacturing company just outside Columbus. My life has always been structured, not rigid, just deliberate. I wake up at the same time every morning. I leave the house around 8. I stop at the same coffee shop where they already know my order without asking. I'm usually home before 6 unless something goes wrong with a project timeline. Evenings are predictable, either the gym or my garage, where I spend hours restoring older cars piece by piece. I bought my condo 3 years ago. It's quiet, orderly, mine. I've always believed that if you build your life carefully enough, things don't fall apart without warning. That belief lasted until Marcus. Marcus Hale is 27, charming in a way that feels effortless. The kind of man who doesn't walk into a room, he settles into it like he's always belonged there. When we met at a backyard barbecue through mutual friends, it didn't feel like the beginning of something complicated. It felt easy, natural, like two people stepping into rhythm without trying. Within a month, we were staying over at each other's places. Not long after that, we were official. Marcus worked as a graphic designer at a marketing firm. He always had stories, strange client requests, ridiculous deadlines, the kind of chaos he somehow made sound entertaining instead of exhausting. For most of our relationship, things were solid. Then about 6 weeks ago, his ex-girlfriend started texting him again. They had dated for 4 years before me and broke up about 8 months before we met. He told me it ended because she wanted stability and he wasn't there yet. He said she was always pushing him to grow up, and at the time, he just wasn't ready. It sounded simple enough. People have pasts. I wasn't threatened by the idea of someone existing somewhere in his history. But then she came back with a speech about how she'd changed. She told him she had a real job now, that she was doing better, that she wanted to apologize and make things right. Marcus showed me the messages. "I just want closure," he said, handing me his phone like transparency itself should be enough to settle any doubt. And at the time, it was. That sounded reasonable, so I told him to do what he needed to do. They met for coffee once, then it happened again. And then the texts became daily. At first, it was small things. A name lighting up his phone more often than before. A smile he didn't explain. A habit of turning the screen slightly away without thinking. Then it became constant. Good morning texts, late night memes, inside jokes that I wasn't part of. The kind of steady, quiet communication that doesn't look like closure anymore. This is usually the part where people talk themselves into staying quiet because they don't want to seem jealous. I did that too. I told myself I was being rational, that I trusted him, that I wasn't going to become someone who questioned every notification. But trust doesn't survive when someone keeps feeding it reasons to die. About 3 weeks ago, I finally said something. I kept my voice calm. "I feel like you've been talking to her a lot. I said one night while we were sitting on my couch. His reaction was immediate, sharp. We're just friends now, he said. Bianca, adults can be friends with their exes. I understand that, I replied. But this feels excessive. You're texting her more than you text me. That's not true, he said quickly. Then his tone changed. You're being insecure. Just like that. Not a conversation, not a discussion, just a label. Clean, simple, dismissive. Something to end the topic without actually addressing it. I remember sitting there, feeling the shift. Not just in the conversation, in us. But I dropped it because I didn't want to be that woman. I didn't want to become someone who monitors phones and counts messages and turns everything into a problem. I wanted to trust my boyfriend, even if it meant ignoring the quiet voice in my head telling me something wasn't right. Last week, we had plans for Friday dinner. He canceled last minute, said he was exhausted from work, said he needed to decompress. I believed him. His job could be stressful. So I texted back, no worries, get some rest. 3 hours later, he posted an Instagram story. He was at an indie concert venue, with her, and he was wearing the jacket I had helped him pick out for our dinner. I didn't call him. I didn't argue. I screenshotted it. And then I just sat there, staring at my phone, letting the reality settle in slowly, instead of all at once. Sometimes a screenshot isn't about revenge. It's about proof. Proof for your own mind. So no one can talk you out of what you saw. The next day, Saturday, he came over like nothing had happened. Like Friday night didn't exist. Like I hadn't watched him replace me in real time through a glowing screen. I opened the door, let him in, watched him move through my space like he always did, comfortable, familiar, unaware of the line he'd already crossed. I asked him casually, "How was your restful night in?" "Oh, it was good," he said, smiling. "I really needed that alone time." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I saw you were at a show." For half a second, his face froze. It was subtle, but I saw it. Then he recovered. "Oh yeah," he said. "She had an extra ticket last minute. I didn't think you'd be into that kind of music anyway." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a justification. Delivered like I was supposed to accept it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Quietly. Permanently. Because once someone can lie that easily to your face, it changes everything. It doesn't just affect that moment. It rewrites all the ones before it. And suddenly, you're not just reacting to one lie. You're questioning all of them. Then came Tuesday. Marcus was at my place. We were both working from home. I was in the living room answering emails, half listening to the hum of the dishwasher and the muted traffic outside, and he was on the couch with his laptop, supposedly doing design work. His ex called him. Not texted. Called. He answered immediately. No hesitation, no glance at me, no awkward smile, no, "Hey, let me take this later." Just instant access. He stood up, took the phone, walked into my bedroom, and closed the door behind him. I remember staring at that closed door longer than I should have. At first, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was upset. Maybe there was some harmless reason for a 40-second conversation to need privacy. But it wasn't 40 seconds. It was 43 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock again and again, each time hoping enough minutes had passed for me to feel ridiculous for caring. Instead, every minute made it worse. The apartment felt different with that door closed. Smaller, colder. Like I had somehow become the outsider in my own home. I could hear the faint rise and fall of his voice through the wall, low and private. Once I heard him laugh. Not loud, just enough. That sound did something to me. Not dramatic, not explosive, just final. When he came out, he was smiling. Smiling. He sat back down on the couch like nothing about that was strange. Like it was completely normal to take a long, private phone call with your ex-girlfriend behind a closed door in your girlfriend's bedroom and then slide back into the afternoon as if the air hadn't changed at all. He didn't mention the call, didn't explain, didn't offer context. He just reached for his coffee and opened his laptop again. That was the moment I stopped trying to be the understanding woman. Because understanding is not the same thing as volunteering for disrespect. I waited maybe 10 minutes, just enough for my voice to steady completely. Then I said, "We need to talk about your ex." He leaned back and rolled his eyes. An actual eye roll. "Here we go again," he said. I kept my tone even. "You lied about Friday. You've been talking to her constantly, and you just spent almost an hour on the phone with her in my bedroom with the door closed. This isn't friendship anymore." He crossed his arms and gave me that look people use when they've already decided they're innocent, and your feelings are just an inconvenience. "You're being controlling," he said. "I'm allowed to have female friends." "She's not just some female friend," I said. "She's your ex-girlfriend of 4 years, and you are clearly emotionally involved." He stared at me like I was exhausting him. like I was the difficult part of his day. So what? He said. You're giving me an ultimatum now? It's her or you. I shook my head. I'm saying what you're doing is disrespectful. You prioritized her over me. You lied about seeing her. You took a private call with her while you were here with me. This is not normal. His expression hardened. And then he said it. Clear, flat, almost bored. I'm not letting go of my friendship with her just because you're insecure. Deal with it or don't, but I'm not changing. There are moments in a relationship where you realize you and the other person are no longer standing on the same ground. This was one of those moments. I didn't feel shocked. That's the strange part. I felt calm. Not because it didn't hurt, because something in me had finally stopped arguing with reality. I looked at him and said, okay. He smiled, actually smiled, like he had won something. Good, he said. I knew you'd understand. You're not like other women. That line almost would have been funny if it hadn't been so insulting. As if my value to him depended on how quietly I could swallow humiliation. I looked at him for a long second and then said, I understand you're choosing her, so I'll go forward without you. His smile disappeared. What does that mean? It means you keep your ex, I said. I keep my dignity. We're done. Goodbye. For one full second, he just stared at me, like his mind couldn't process that the conversation had gone somewhere he didn't approve of. Then the panic hit. Wait, what? He said. You're breaking up with me? Yes. You can't be serious. I am. He stood up so fast the couch cushion shifted. Bianca, come on. You're ending a 2-year relationship over this? No, I said. I'm ending it because you lied. Because you prioritized another woman over me. Because you told me to deal with being disrespected. His eyes filled almost instantly. Tears. Real or strategic, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. I thought you were different, he said. I thought you trusted me. I did trust you, I said quietly. Then you lied about Friday. That was one time. One time that I know about. He looked away. And that silence answered more than any confession could have. I felt my stomach tighten, but not from doubt, from confirmation. How many times had he needed space? How many times had he been tired? How many small stories had I accepted because I loved him enough to believe what was easiest to believe? He wiped out his face and took a step toward me. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. He changed tactics fast, like he needed to find the version of the conversation that would give him control again. So that's it? He snapped. You're just throwing everything away? You threw it away when you decided honesty was optional. He laughed once under his breath, bitter and disbelieving. Wow, you really are doing this. Yes. Bianca, this is ridiculous. Maybe, I said, but it's still over. His tears dried almost as quickly as they'd appeared. Anger moved in where hurt had been. That shift was so fast it would have been dizzying if I hadn't already started expecting it. You're being dramatic, he said. You're throwing away 2 years over nothing. No, I'm refusing to stay in something that requires me to accept less than basic respect. He grabbed his bag from the chair and shoved his laptop inside harder than necessary. This is unbelievable. I didn't answer. He looked around my condo like he suddenly couldn't believe I wasn't trying to stop him. I think part of him expected me to soften, to cry, to say maybe we should take a day, to negotiate. But once I got calm, I stayed there. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. He walked toward the door, then turned back. So that's really it? He asked. No conversation? No chance for me to explain? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the audacity of that question, after weeks of dismissal, after every chance I had already given him, landed somewhere beyond irritation. You had weeks to explain, I said. Instead, you lied and called me insecure. He stared at me. Then with that same sharpness he always used when he wanted to wound something on the way out, he said, Good luck finding someone who'll put up with your jealousy. I stepped aside and opened the door. Good luck finding someone who mistakes disrespect for honesty, I said. That got to him. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. He walked out without another word. I closed the door behind him, locked it. Then I stood there with my hand still on the lock, listening to the sudden silence. It didn't feel like devastation. It felt like the moment after an alarm stops ringing. The room was still. My chest hurt. But underneath the hurt was relief, so strong it almost made me sit down on the floor. A little later, one of my friends texted me. She told me Marcus had already posted an Instagram story. When your girlfriend chooses pride over love. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed that he had already started rewriting the story. In his version, he wasn't dishonest. He was misunderstood. In his version, I wasn't hurt. I was cold. I blocked him everywhere. Instagram, Snapchat, his number. Done. I expected sadness, and it was there, somewhere underneath everything else. But mostly, what I felt was relief. That might sound cold, but spending weeks second-guessing your own reality changes your nervous system. It keeps you in a constant state of low, private panic. You start measuring your words, doubting your instincts, editing your own pain to make the other person comfortable. Relief is what happens when your body realizes it doesn't have to do that anymore. That night, he tried calling me over and over. When he couldn't reach me, he borrowed his sister's phone. I answered once because I didn't recognize the number. "Hello?" "Finally," she snapped before I could say anything else. "Why did you block him? That's so immature." I closed my eyes for a second and leaned against the kitchen counter. "Is this really you using someone else's phone to violate a boundary?" She exhaled sharply like I was the rude one. "You two need to talk." "We did talk," I said. "He told me he was keeping his ex in his life no matter how I felt." I said, "Okay, I'm out." Conversation complete. "You didn't let him explain." "He had 3 weeks to explain," I said. "Instead, he lied and called me insecure." She kept repeating the same script. "You're ending this over a friendship." "Not a friendship," I said. "An emotional affair." Then I hung up. And blocked her number too. For a few minutes after that, I just stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the dark reflection in the microwave door. I looked tired. Older somehow. But steadier. The worst part was over, I told myself. I really believed that. I thought the breakup had happened. The truth had been named. The boundary had been set. I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. An hour later, his best friend texted me. I didn't even know she had my number. "Hey," she wrote. "Maybe you should hear Marcus out. He's really upset. I think there's been a misunderstanding." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling that familiar pressure. Soft, polite, almost reasonable on the surface. The kind of pressure that tries to make you doubt your own clarity. I typed back, "There's no misunderstanding. He chose her. I chose me." She replied almost immediately. He didn't choose her. They're just friends. You're being unfair." I read it once, then again, and then I realized something. This wasn't about understanding. This was about protecting him. People don't like uncomfortable truths. They reshape them into something easier to defend. I typed, "We're not together anymore. My fairness isn't his concern." Then I blocked her. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to be pulled back into something I had already stepped out of. Then his mother started calling. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Disappointment, guilt, that soft, controlled tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while quietly shifting blame onto you. She called his weeks of lying a mistake, a small mistake. She told me I should be mature, that relationships require compromise, that I shouldn't throw something away over something so minor. I listened to the voicemail twice. Not because I was considering what she said, because I wanted to understand how Marcus became the way he was. And suddenly it made sense. If your behavior is always minimized, you never learn that it's a problem. If your lies are always softened into mistakes, you never learn to stop lying. I didn't call her back. Work got strange after that. We had one mutual friend, the one who introduced us at the barbecue, a woman from my gym. She pulled me aside after a workout, her voice quiet but curious. "Bianca, what happened?" she asked. "Marcus is saying you ended things out of nowhere." "Out of nowhere." I repeated the words in my head, almost tasting how wrong they were. "Out of nowhere," I said. "He's been emotionally involved with his ex for weeks." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's not what he said." "Of course it's not," I replied. I told her everything. The canceled dinner, the concert, the lies, the constant messages, the phone call in my bedroom. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Yeah, he left out some details. Funny how that works." She showed me the group chat. Marcus had written a long message about how I couldn't handle him having female friends, about how I had trust issues, about how he dodged a bullet. I screenshotted it, not because I wanted to fight back, because something in me knew this wasn't over. When someone starts rewriting the story publicly, it stops being just about heartbreak. It becomes about reputation, and that's a different kind of problem. That evening around 6, someone knocked on my door. I walked over and looked through the peephole. Marcus, holding takeout from my favorite Thai place. For a second, I just stood there, watching him through the small circle of glass. He looked composed, like he had decided this was a simple misunderstanding he could fix with the right tone and the right gesture. He knocked again. "Bianca, I know you're home. Your car's outside." I didn't move. "Please," he said, "I just want to talk." His voice softened. Then it cracked. "I brought dinner, your favorite. We can just sit and talk." I stayed silent. A few seconds passed. Then a minute. Then I heard it, crying. Not quiet. not private. Loud enough that I knew the neighbors could hear. I closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about pressure. I walked back to my laptop and opened Google Voice. He was blocked everywhere else. I typed, "I'm not opening the door. You need to leave or I'll call the building manager for harassment." A few seconds later, I heard his phone buzz. The crying stopped. Silence. Then footsteps. When I opened the door later, the food was sitting there, still warm. Next to it was a folded note. I picked it up slowly. Read it once. He wrote that he was sorry for lying about Friday. Then he wrote that I was wrong too. For not giving him a chance. For overreacting. For not trusting him. He wrote that we were supposed to be a team. He wrote, "I love you." I stared at those words longer than I expected. Because even in his apology, he couldn't fully take responsibility. It was still shared blame. Still control. An apology that says, "I'm sorry, but you're also wrong," isn't an apology. It's negotiation. I put the food in the fridge. I threw the note away. That night, my friend called me. "Document everything," she said. "Screenshots, call logs, voicemails, everything." I frowned. "That feels extreme." "It's not," she said. "I've seen this before. When someone loses control, they escalate, and then they try to flip the story." I didn't like the idea of needing evidence for a breakup, but I started saving everything anyway. The next morning, I changed my door code. I informed the building staff that Marcus wasn't allowed up. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A couple days later, I went downstairs early, 7 a.m., and there he was, sitting in the lobby, hair messy, same clothes from the day before, holding coffee like this was some kind of casual morning date. "Morning," he said. I stopped walking. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting for you," he said. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "We don't." I turned toward the exit. He stood up quickly. "I'm not leaving until you hear me out." I looked at him for a second. Really looked. And something in me settled again. Not anger. Clarity. "How did you even get in here?" I asked. He shrugged slightly. "Followed someone through the door." That was enough. That was all I needed to know. I walked straight to the front desk and spoke to the building staff. Made it clear. He wasn't allowed inside. Under any circumstances. I didn't argue with him. Didn't explain. Didn't engage. I just left. Here's something I learned in that moment. When someone ignores no, the problem is no longer the relationship. The problem is entitlement. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was his sister. "You need to stop this," she said immediately. "You're playing with his emotions." I leaned back against the wall, suddenly tired. "Stop what?" I asked. "I broke up with him. He keeps showing up." "He made one mistake," she said, "and you're punishing him like he committed a crime." "He made multiple choices over weeks," I said, and then told me to accept it or leave. So I left. She got quiet for a second. Then her voice changed. Lower, more intense. "He's not okay," she said. "If something happens to him, that's on you." My stomach dropped. There it was. Not concern. Not care. Control. Through fear. I ended the call immediately. Then I screenshotted the call log. Because that kind of statement, that's not love. That's manipulation. And it's dangerous. After that, things escalated fast. After that call, everything shifted from uncomfortable to unmistakable. The next morning, I woke up to a wall of missed calls. Unknown numbers, voicemails, messages that grew sharper, more aggressive with each one. The last message said, "If you don't fix this, we will." An hour later, my phone started buzzing again. This time from friends. Screenshots. Marcus had posted on Facebook. A long post. Carefully written. Polished. Almost rehearsed. He talked about emotional abuse. About how I had isolated him. Controlled who he talked to. Made him feel like he was walking on eggshells. He wrote that I abandoned him when he tried to set healthy boundaries. It was upside down. Completely inverted. Like watching someone take your life and rewrite it with you cast as the villain. I read it once. Then I put my phone down. Because reacting publicly was exactly what he wanted. Those posts aren't about truth. They're about audience. Some people in the comments questioned it. Some believed him immediately. That's how it works. You don't need everyone to believe you. Just enough. Monday at work, someone from accounting approached me at lunch. She spoke quietly, like she wasn't sure how much she should say. "Hey, I saw something online about you." I nodded. "Yeah, my ex is upset I broke up with him." She hesitated. He made it sound serious. "I know," I said. He also left out the part where he was seeing his ex behind my back. She studied my face for a second, then nodded slowly. "That makes more sense," she said. The post felt too perfect. At least someone saw through it. That evening, the front desk called me. "There's a woman here asking for you," the receptionist said. "She says she has important documents." "Don't let her up," I said immediately. It was his best friend. She argued with the staff for almost 10 minutes before finally leaving. But she didn't leave empty-handed. She left a thick envelope. 3 pages. Handwritten. I sat on my couch and read it. Every word. It wasn't an apology. It was a manifesto. He wrote that he did nothing wrong. That his ex was just a friend. That my insecurities destroyed something beautiful. That he was willing to forgive me if I apologized. If I agreed to couples counseling. If I admitted I was wrong. And then the last paragraph. The ultimatum. Call me by Friday. We can start fresh. If you don't, I'll know you never really loved me. I lowered the pages slowly. Even now. Even after everything. He still thought he was in control. That's when I called a lawyer. Just a consultation. I explained everything. The constant contact. The showing up. The messages through other people. The public accusations. The threat from his sister. The lawyer didn't hesitate. "Document everything," she said. "Do not engage, and if he shows up again, we escalate." So I waited. Friday came. I didn't call. Saturday morning, the building called me again. "Bianca," the receptionist said, her voice tight. "He's here, and he's not alone." I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear, expectation. I grabbed my phone, started recording. Then I went downstairs. Marcus was standing in the lobby. Next to him, his ex-girlfriend. She looked uncomfortable. He looked confident, like this was his final move. "You had until Friday," he said the moment he saw me. "And you had until I blocked you to respect boundaries," I replied. His jaw tightened. Then he gestured to the woman beside him. "This is her," he said, "since you've been so obsessed." I almost smiled. "I'm not obsessed with anyone," I said. "I just don't stay with people who lie." She glanced between us, clearly unsure. Marcus jumped in quickly. "We've been having communication issues," he told her. "She's been overreacting. I wanted you here so we could clear things up." Communication issues. I let that sit for a second. Then I unlocked my phone, pulled up the screenshots, the canceled dinner, the messages, the Instagram story, the timestamp. I held the phone out slightly. "Friday night," I said calmly. "He told me he was home resting, then he went to a concert with you." Her expression changed instantly. She looked at Marcus. "You told me you were single that night." Marcus froze. "Just for a second. We were basically broken up," he said quickly. I shook my head. "No," I said. "We had one conversation where I said he was talking to you too much." She stared at him now. Really stared. "You said you were single," she repeated. "I was emotionally single," he said. The silence that followed was heavy. Not dramatic, just undeniable. She stepped back slightly. "So you were dating both of us," she said. "It wasn't like that," he tried. But his voice didn't have the same control anymore. That's when the police walked in. 2 officers. Calm, tired, efficient. The receptionist explained the situation. I explained it again. "He keeps showing up. I've asked him to stop. I have documentation." Marcus started protesting. I'm trying to fix our relationship." "There is no relationship," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I ended it. "You don't get to force your way back in." The officers told him to leave. He hesitated, argued. Then they warned him. Trespassing. That was enough. His ex touched his arm lightly. "Let's go," she said quietly. He didn't look at me again as they walked out. The officers took my information. Told me I could file for a protection order. Told me they would note everything. When I went back upstairs, I sat on my couch and just breathed. It's a strange feeling. Watching someone fall apart because you enforced a boundary they never thought you would enforce. That afternoon, my friend came over with food. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Monday, I filed for the protection order. Paperwork, statements, evidence. The judge granted a temporary order. No contact, no proximity to my home or work. There would be a hearing later, but for now, it was enough. The order was served Tuesday. Almost immediately, his mother tried to contact me through my workplace. My boss shut it down. "Not happening," she told me. "You did the right thing." For the first time in weeks, everything went quiet. That night, I checked my email. There was one message from his ex-girlfriend. Subject line, "I'm sorry." She wrote that she didn't know the truth, that he told her we were already over, that when she realized what really happened, she cut contact. She said he had been calling her nonstop, blaming her, saying she ruined everything. She apologized. Said I deserved better. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. But I won't lie. It mattered. Not because I needed validation, but because it confirmed something important. I wasn't crazy. My reality was real. And that's the part that breaks you the most in situations like this. Not just the betrayal. The way someone tries to convince you that your own eyes are wrong. Now everything is settling. I feel tired, disappointed, but also relieved. Because this happened now, not later. Not after more time, more investment, more entanglement. I keep thinking about that moment. When he said, deal with it, that wasn't just a sentence. It was a test. Accept less. Or leave. And I'm glad I left. Because dignity isn't something you negotiate for someone who treats it like an inconvenience. If I took anything from this, it's this. If someone calls you insecure every time you bring up a real concern, they're not protecting peace. They're protecting their behavior. We're just friends means nothing when it comes with lies and secrecy. An apology that includes "but you're wrong too" isn't accountability. And when a breakup turns into harassment, you document everything and you stop engaging because boundaries only work when you enforce them. So now I'll ask you, what would you have done? Would you have stayed longer or left the moment things stopped making sense? My name is Hazel Cooper. I was 34 when this happened. And until that Thanksgiving, I believed that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing truly collapsed without warning. I believed in steady things, predictable things, the kind of life where you make the right decisions, take responsibility, and things, maybe not perfect, but at least don't fall apart behind your back. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio with my younger sister, Erin, and our dad, Ronald. My mom died when I was 19. After that, it was just the three of us trying to figure out how to keep being a family without her. Dad owned a 2-story brick house on the east side of town. It wasn't big, it wasn't impressive, but it was everything. Birthdays, holidays, late-night conversations at the kitchen table, arguments that cooled into quiet forgiveness. That house held all of it. And after Mom died, even as everything else changed, the house didn't. Maybe that's why Dad held on to it so tightly. Maybe that's why we all did. I moved out in my mid-20s, built my own life, made mistakes, got married, got divorced, ended up renting a condo about 20 minutes away. Erin stayed. Or maybe it's more accurate to say, she never really left. At the time, I told myself she was just being the better daughter. She stopped by more, took Dad grocery shopping, managed his doctor appointments, set up his medications in those plastic organizers with the little labeled compartments. She had a key to the house. Then, slowly, she became part of the house. You don't notice that kind of shift right away. It happens quietly, like furniture being rearranged while you're not looking. Every family has roles people fall into without realizing it. I was the dependable one, the one who showed up when something broke, when something needed fixing. Erin was the emotional one, quick to cry, quick to react, somehow always managing to get her way anyway. And Dad was the peacekeeper. After Mom died, he avoided conflict like it was something contagious. If tension showed up, he smoothed it over, ignored it, pretended it wasn't there. At first, nothing about Erin's closeness to him felt wrong. He was getting older. He needed help. She worked remotely for a medical billing company. Her schedule was flexible. Mine wasn't. I worked long hours managing operations for a regional supply warehouse. I wasn't there as often as I should have been. I knew that, and I carried that guilt quietly. Erin knew it too, which, looking back, probably made everything easier for her. Because from the outside, it looked simple. She was the devoted daughter. I was the one who meant well, but wasn't around enough. The first time something felt off was about 7 months before Thanksgiving. Dad mentioned casually over lunch that he had met with some paperwork people Erin recommended. He said it like it didn't matter, like he was talking about getting the gutters cleaned. I remember pausing mid-bite. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked. He shrugged. "Estate planning, power of attorney stuff, boring old man business." I waited. He didn't elaborate. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He smiled, the kind of smile meant to end a conversation before it starts. "Don't worry about it. Erin's helping me handle everything." That phrase stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because estate planning was strange, it wasn't. He was 72, high blood pressure, diabetes, early signs of memory issues he refused to acknowledge. Of course he needed to plan. But Erin's helping me handle everything, without telling me. Later that week, I asked her about it. We were standing in Dad's driveway. She was loading cases of bottled water into the garage freezer like she owned the place. "Why didn't you tell me Dad was meeting with a lawyer?" I asked. She didn't even hesitate. "Because it was routine, Hazel. Not everything needs to be a family meeting." Her tone was light, dismissive. "I'm not saying it does," I said carefully, "but I'm his daughter too." She looked at me then, really looked, and there was something in her expression I didn't recognize, something sharper. "You're also the one who's never here," she said. "Someone had to handle it. That should have been a bigger moment than it was. But instead, I let it go. Because arguing in a driveway over something I didn't fully understand felt unnecessary. At least that's what I told myself. Over the next few months, things changed. Subtly at first. Then, not so subtly. Erin started answering Dad's phone. If I called, sometimes she'd pick up and say he was resting, or too tired to talk. When I stopped by unannounced, she was there more often than not. She decided what groceries he needed, which contractors to hire, whether he should attend family events. And if Dad disagreed, she didn't argue. She pouted, and somehow that was enough. He'd give in, every time. From the outside, it looked like care. Attentive, responsible, loving. But if you stood there long enough, really paid attention, it felt like control. One Sunday in August, I came over to fix a loose handrail on the back porch. I walked in through the back door and found Erin in Dad's den, going through a filing cabinet. She slammed the drawers shut so fast it echoed. "What are you doing?" I asked. She rolled her eyes like I was the problem. Organizing. "In his locked cabinet?" He gave me the key. I looked at Dad. He was in his recliner, barely glancing up from the TV. "She's helping me get things in order," he said. Something in the way he said it felt rehearsed. Around that time, Aunt Denise started making comments. She'd always been blunt, the kind of woman who didn't soften things just to make them easier to hear. At a cousin's birthday cookout, she pulled me aside. "Your sister is circling that house like a hawk," she said. I laughed. "'Cause what else do you do when someone says something that uncomfortable?" "Yeah, you think she's trying to get Dad to leave it to her?" Denise didn't laugh. She just looked at me. "Leave it to her?" she said quietly. "Honey, I think she's trying to get it before he's even gone." That was the first time the thought crossed my mind. Not as a joke, not as gossip, but as something possible. I wanted to dismiss it. I tried to. But the more I watched, the harder that became. Then September happened, and everything shifted. September started with a phone call that should have been small. That was the thing about family betrayals, I learned. They rarely arrive looking dramatic. They show up disguised as paperwork, as a changed address, as a tiny detail nobody bothers to explain. Dad called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was still at work. He sounded distracted, unsteady in that particular way that made me sit up straighter before he'd even finished the first sentence. "Hazel," he said, "did you change the homeowner's insurance?" I turned away from my desk and shut my office door. "No, why?" There was a pause on the line, and I could hear him shuffling paper. "I got a letter," he said. "It has Erin's mailing address listed as the property contact." For a second, I didn't say anything. I just stared at the wall in front of me like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something harmless if I gave them long enough. "What do you mean her address is listed?" I asked. Another pause. "She said she was helping with bills," he said, too quickly this time, like he wanted the explanation to arrive before the question had fully formed. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe. That word again. The word people use when they know something is wrong, but don't want to look directly at it. "Can you show me the letter tonight?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Sure," he said finally. "If you want." If I want. By the time I drove to the house after work, the sun had already started dropping behind the trees, turning the street gold in that soft, misleading way evening does when it wants everything to look peaceful. Dad looked nervous before I even stepped inside. That was what hit me first. Not anger, not confusion. Nervousness. And Erin was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, one ankle crossed over the other, looking less like a daughter helping her father, and more like someone waiting for a meeting to begin. I set my keys on the counter and looked at Dad. "Can I see the letter?" Before he could answer, Erin smiled without warmth. There's really no need to make a thing out of this." I looked at her, then back at Dad. "I'd like to see it anyway." He reached for the envelope near the fruit bowl and handed it to me. I read it once. Then again. The policy contact information had been changed. Not the ownership, not yet. But the mailing contact for the property had been rerouted to Erin. "Why?" I asked quietly. Erin folded her arms. "Because he forgets things, Hazel. I'm preventing mistakes." Dad kept his eyes on his coffee mug. "It's easier this way," he murmured. That sentence did something to me. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how familiar they'd become. Everything was easier this way. Easier for Erin to manage. Easier for Dad to avoid conflict. Easier for everyone except the person still trying to understand why decisions kept happening in the dark. I set the letter down carefully. Easier for who? Dad didn't answer. Erin did. "You really need to stop acting like every practical decision is some kind of conspiracy." I let out a slow breath. Changing insurance contact information without discussing it with him properly or mentioning it to me isn't practical. It's secretive. Her expression sharpened. Oh please. You don't get to swoop in after work twice a month and suddenly demand oversight. There it was again, the same accusation dressed in different words. You're not here enough. You don't know enough. You don't get a say. I looked at Dad, hoping, stupidly maybe, that he would interrupt, that he would say this had all been temporary or clerical or misunderstood. Instead, he just rubbed the side of his thumb against the ceramic mug and said nothing. And for the first time, I felt something colder than anger. I felt late. Late to a conversation that had clearly been going on without me for a long time. That night, I didn't fight. I could feel Erin wanting me to. She sat straighter every time I paused, like she was bracing for the version of me she'd already prepared herself to dismiss. The emotional one, the difficult one, the daughter who showed up too late and made everything harder. So I didn't give her that. I picked up my purse, told Dad I'd call him tomorrow, and left. In the driveway, I stood by my car longer than I needed to, staring at the kitchen window. Their silhouettes moved behind the curtains. Erin's head tilted toward him. Dad's shoulders bent forward in that tired, defeated way I had started seeing more and more. And I had the sudden, ugly thought that she was not just helping him anymore. She was narrating his life back to him, telling him what had happened, what he needed, what was easiest, what was best. And slowly, he was beginning to believe her version more than his own. October made everything worse. Dad fell in the garage one afternoon and sprained his wrist. It wasn't a catastrophic injury. No surgery, no hospitalization, nothing dramatic. But Erin seized on it like it was evidence in a trial only she had known was happening. Suddenly, every conversation with relatives included phrases like transition planning and long-term stability and making sure everything is protected. She said them with the same careful tone people use when they want to sound reasonable. Measured, concerned, mature. And because she said them in front of other people, they started sounding true. At Sunday lunch after church, I heard her telling Uncle Ray, "I just don't think Dad should have to carry the burden of decisions anymore." At a cousin's birthday dinner, she said, "The important thing is reducing his stress." At the pharmacy counter, I heard her murmur to the tech, "His memory has been getting worse." Each statement by itself could have passed as concern. Together, they built a case. I tried to counter it in practical ways. I asked Dad if he wanted some in-home help. "No," he said. I suggested a meal service twice a week. Too much fuss. I asked whether he'd feel better with a part-time nurse checking in. Erin answered before he did. That would only upset him. I looked directly at Dad. Would it? He hesitated, then gave the answer I already knew she wanted. Maybe later. Later. Everything important in that house had started happening later. Questions later, conversations later, clarity later. Only the documents apparently were happening now. A week after the garage fall, I stopped by to drop off groceries and found Erin in the hallway, outside Dad's bedroom, talking to him in a low voice. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I only froze because of the way she was speaking. Soft and patient in that condescending tone people mistake for kindness. "You know Hazel means well," she was saying, "but she gets dramatic. That's why I don't tell her everything. You need calm, not conflict." My throat went dry. There was a pause. Then Dad said tiredly, "I know." I stepped back before either of them saw me. I stood in the kitchen holding a bag of soup and bread like an idiot, staring at the counter, while my heart thudded too hard against my ribs. That hurt more than I expected. Not because Erin was saying it. I could have handled that. Because Dad was starting to agree. Or maybe agreeing was simpler than resisting. Maybe that was all it was. But pain doesn't care much about the difference. A few days later, Aunt Denise called me out of nowhere. "You sound tired," she said as soon as I answered. "I am tired." "Mm-hmm." A beat. "And your sister's still playing Saint?" I almost laughed. Something like that. Denise didn't rush me. She was good at that. Good at waiting in a way that made silence feel safe instead of awkward. So I told her about the insurance, about Erin speaking for Dad, about the way every concern I raised was turned into proof that I was the difficult one. When I finished, Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Hazel, I want you to hear me clearly." I leaned against my kitchen counter. "I'm listening." "You keep treating this like a misunderstanding," she said. "I don't think it is." Her words settled heavily between us. "I don't know what it is yet," I said. "Yes, you do. You just don't want it to be true." That was the problem. I did know, or at least some part of me did. The part that noticed how Erin answered questions meant for Dad. The part that kept hearing rehearsed phrases in his voice. The part that knew guilt was being used as a leash. I just didn't have proof. And without proof, everything felt slippery. Accusations inside my own head. Patterns I couldn't quite pin down. A house that looked exactly the same from the outside while something inside it kept shifting out of place. Then came the Saturday morning, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I stopped by with cinnamon rolls from the bakery Dad liked, the one on the north side that used too much icing and always made him happy anyway. For once, the house was quiet. No television, no Aaron's car in the driveway, no sound of cabinet doors opening and closing like someone taking inventory of the place. Dad was in the shower upstairs. I set the bakery box on the counter and turned toward the dining room. That was when I saw the envelope. Manila, lying in the center of the table like it had been placed there deliberately. A yellow sticky note was attached to the front in Dad's shaky handwriting. Hazel, just my name. Nothing else. I remember walking toward it slowly. I remember the strain and pressure in my ears, like my body had already understood something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I opened it. Inside was a photocopy of a deed transfer form. At first, the words didn't make sense. Not because they were complicated, because they were too clear. The property address was Dad's house. The transfer had already been filed. Joint ownership with right of survivorship. Ronald Cooper and Erin Cooper. Her name, already on the house. My hands actually went cold. I stared at the signatures next. Dad had signed. Erin had signed. There was a notary stamp, dated 2 months earlier. For a second, I honestly thought there had to be another page, another explanation, something temporary, some legal wording I was misreading. But there it was. Real, finished, filed, not a future intention, not a discussion. A completed transfer. Upstairs, I heard the shower shut off. And in the sudden silence that followed, the whole room seemed to tilt. I was still holding the papers when Dad walked into the kitchen, toweling his hair. He stopped the second he saw my face. Then his eyes dropped to the document in my hands. And something inside him collapsed. "What is this?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too controlled, too quiet. He sat down slowly at the kitchen table, like a man bracing himself for something he knew he couldn't avoid anymore. "Aaron," he started, then caught himself. "Aaron said it would protect the house." Protect it. The word echoed in my head in a way that felt almost absurd. Protect it from what? He rubbed his wrist, the one he'd sprained in the garage, like the memory of that fall had somehow followed him into this moment. "Probate," he said. "Bills, complications. And you weren't going to tell me?" He didn't look at me. "She said you'd overreact." I let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, except there was nothing funny in it. Of course she did. "Did you understand this?" I asked. "When you signed it, did anyone explain that you were giving her ownership now, not later? Now?" He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. That hesitation said everything he couldn't. "I thought it was later," he said finally, "when I was gone." My chest tightened. "Did you meet with a lawyer?" "Yes." "Who?" He frowned slightly, searching for the name. "I don't remember." That hit harder than anything else so far. "You don't remember who handled the legal transfer of your house?" He shook his head, looking embarrassed. Not defensive, not angry. Ashamed. "Erin set it up," he said. "She said it was standard." Standard. I sat down across from him, the papers still between us like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "Did you want this?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He just kept rubbing his wrist, over and over, like he was trying to erase something invisible. "I just want peace, Hazel," he said. There it was again. Peace. Not clarity. Not fairness. Not understanding. Just peace. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't let myself see clearly before. Erin wasn't forcing him. Not directly. She was offering him a way out. Out of decisions, out of responsibility, out of conflict. All he had to do was sign, and she would take care of everything, including the parts that should have belonged to him. "Do you know what this means?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time there was real uncertainty in his eyes. "No," he said. So I told him, carefully, piece by piece, that she now co-owned the house. That with rights of survivorship, it would automatically pass to her. That depending on the situation, she could block a sale. That combined with other legal tools, she could eventually control decisions he didn't even realize he was giving up. I watched his expression change as I spoke. Confusion first, then something sharper. Fear. "I didn't know it worked like that," he said quietly. I believed him. That was the worst part. "Then why did you sign?" I asked. He looked past me, out the window toward the driveway. "Because she cried," he said. I didn't say anything. "She said she'd given up so much helping me," he continued. "She said you had your own life, that if something happened, you'd move on, and she'd be the one left dealing with everything." Each word landed like something heavy and deliberate. She said this was the only way she'd feel secure. Secure. That word twisted in my chest. Not because it was unfamiliar, because it was calculated. She hadn't asked. She hadn't discussed. She had made him feel like he owed her something, like love had a price, like care required compensation, and that price was his house. I stood up so suddenly my chair scraped against the floor. Dad, I said more firmly now, this isn't okay. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know, I said, and I did. That was what made it so complicated. He wasn't malicious. He was tired, lonely, afraid of being a burden, and Aaron had turned all of that into leverage. We need to fix this, I said. He nodded slowly. But then he added something that almost made me lose my patience. Not before Thanksgiving. I stared at him. What? I don't want conflict, he said. Not during the holiday, I almost argued. Every instinct in me said this was urgent, that waiting was dangerous, that every day this arrangement existed gave Aaron more ground. But then I looked at him, really looked, and I saw it. Not just fear, shame. He knew at some level that he'd made a mistake, and he wanted just a little more time pretending things were still normal. Just one more holiday where the cracks didn't show, even if that version of normal didn't exist anymore. I closed my eyes briefly, then nodded. 2 weeks, I said. But after that, we fix it. No more delays. He nodded again, relieved in a way that made me feel both protective and deeply frustrated at the same time. I left before Erin came back, because if I had seen her in that moment, I don't think I would have kept my composure. Instead, I sat in my car with the engine off, the papers still in my hand, and tried to steady my breathing. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I called Aunt Denise. She picked up on the second ring. Well, she said, like she'd been expecting this call. She already put her name on the house, I said. Silence. Then a quiet, I knew it. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the ceiling of my car. He didn't understand what he signed, I added. Of course he didn't, Denise said. That's how this kind of thing works. I need a lawyer. I've got one, she said immediately. Family attorney. Sharp. Doesn't tolerate nonsense. Her name's Marissa. She gave me the number. I called the next morning. Marissa listened. Really listened. I told her everything. The paperwork. The insurance. The power dynamics. The way Erin positioned herself as the only reliable one. When I finished, there was a brief pause on the line. Then she said, "Bring me the copy of the deed. And anything else you can legally access, insurance letters, account notices, anything with a paper trail." Okay. And Hazel, she added. Yes. Do not confront your sister yet, not until we understand exactly what she's done. That part was harder than it sounded. But I agreed. Over the next week, everything I suspected started to solidify into something far more concrete. The deed transfer had been filed properly, legally valid, but the circumstances around it were questionable. Dad had met with a general practice attorney Erin found online, not an elder law specialist. No independent review, no cognitive assessment, no documentation that he fully understood the implications. The lawyer had done what was asked, not what should have been questioned. But then Marissa found something worse. Hazel, she said during one of our calls, your sister isn't just on the deed. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? She's also been named durable power of attorney. The words landed heavier than anything else so far. When? About 6 months ago. 6 months. 6 months of decisions I didn't know about. 6 months of her slowly positioning herself as the authority in every aspect of his life. Suddenly everything made sense. The insurance change. The intercepted calls. The way she spoke for him like it was her right. She hadn't just inserted herself into his life. She had legally anchored herself there. What can we do? I asked. Marissa didn't sugarcoat it. We can challenge the deed, she said, but it won't be easy. Why not? Because legally it was executed. To reverse it, we need to prove he didn't understand what he signed or that there was undue influence. Both options sounded ugly. Both meant dragging everything into the open. That will tear your family apart, she added gently. I let out a slow breath. It already has, I said. There was a pause. Then she continued. Doing nothing guarantees she eventually controls everything. That settled it. Not immediately. Not cleanly. But firmly. I spent 2 nights barely sleeping, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome, every version of what could happen if I pushed this forward, and every version of what would happen if I didn't. Then, on the 3rd morning, Dad called me. He started telling me something about breakfast. Then, mid-sentence, he paused. Your mother would like that, he said. My stomach dropped. Dad, I said carefully, Mom passed away 15 years ago. There was a long silence. Then quietly, Right, of course. That was it. That was the moment everything became clear. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about protection. I called Marissa back that afternoon. "I'm in," I said. We made a plan. Careful. Deliberate. Dad agreed to revoke the power of attorney, to sign a statement about the deed. But he still wanted to wait until after Thanksgiving. Marissa didn't like it. Neither did I. But legally, 2 weeks wouldn't destroy everything, if nothing else changed in the meantime. So I waited, and I watched, and I planned. Because if Erin had built her version of control quietly, I was going to dismantle it in the open. And Thanksgiving was coming. Thanksgiving at my father's house had always been Erin's favorite performance. That was the only way I could describe it now. Not a gathering, not a tradition. A performance. Everything curated down to the smallest detail. The table runner, the candles, the place cards written in careful handwriting like something out of a magazine spread. That year, she outdid herself. By noon, she had already posted a photo of the turkey in the oven with the caption, "Grateful for family." I remember staring at it on my phone and almost laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly her. By 5 o'clock, the house was full. Aunt Denise stood near the kitchen, watching everything with that quiet, knowing expression she always had when she sensed something about to unfold. Uncle Ray was already on his second drink. 2 of my cousins hovered near the dining room, pretending to help, but mostly observing. And Erin moved through it all, like she owned not just the house, but the narrative. Her husband, Daniel, lingered near the hallway, polite but distant. In that way people get when they feel something is off but don't yet know what. Dad sat at the head of the table. He looked tired. But there was something else there too. Something steadier than I'd seen in weeks. We had talked that morning. He knew what was coming. Dinner started the way it always did. Safe topics. Football. Traffic. Someone's promotion. The kind of conversation that fills space without saying anything real. Erin laughed easily. Adjusted plates. Corrected small details. Every movement deliberate. Every smile practiced. And for a moment, just a moment, I understood why it had worked for so long. Because from the outside, it looked perfect. Then Uncle Ray said it, casually, carelessly. "Ronald, you're lucky to still be in this house. Not many people hold on to something like this for so long." Erin smiled. That same calm, effortless smile. "Well," she said lightly, "at least we know it'll stay in the family." Her eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. But it was enough. The room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough. I set my fork down. "That's interesting wording," I said. Her head tilted slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "most people would mention Dad before talking about the house like it's already spoken for. Silence. That particular kind of silence families have. The kind that feels like everyone is holding their breath at the same time." Erin's expression hardened. "Oh my God, Hazel, not today." Dad looked down at his plate. Aunt Denise didn't miss a beat. "Actually," she said calmly, "today seems perfect." Erin's cheeks flushed. "I am not doing this in front of everyone." I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed the copy of the deed in the center of the table. "What is that?" one of my cousins asked quietly. Daniel leaned forward first. Then Uncle Ray. Then everyone else. Erin stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You had no right." "Sit down, Erin." Dad's voice cut through the room. It wasn't loud. But it was firm in a way I hadn't heard in years. She froze. I said, "Sit down." Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered herself back into her chair. And then something happened I hadn't dared to hope for. My father spoke. Not perfectly. Not like a prepared speech. But honestly, he told them everything. That Erin had brought him documents he didn't fully understand. That she had told him it was routine. That she had made him feel guilty. Pressured. Afraid of disappointing her. He admitted he hadn't realized her name was already on the house. That he didn't want that arrangement. Not anymore. Erin tried to interrupt. Once. Twice. The third time, Dad slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "I am not finished." The room went completely still. He turned to Daniel. "Your wife has been making decisions I did not authorize," he said, "and speaking for me when she should not have been." Daniel's face drained of color. Then Dad looked around the table. "On Monday," he continued, "I am revoking the power of attorney and taking legal steps to fix the deed." For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. And then Erin broke. She started crying. Not quietly, not softly, but with a sharp, angry intensity that filled the room. "After everything I did for you," she shouted, "how dare you?" "I gave up my time for you," she continued, her voice rising. "I was the one here. Hazel got to live her life while I handled everything." I kept my voice steady. "Helping Dad doesn't entitle you to his house." Her eyes snapped toward me. "Easy for you to say," she shot back. "You always got away with doing less." There it is. Aunt Denise muttered under her breath. Daniel finally spoke, quiet at first, then firmer. Erin, did you tell me the house was just for future planning? She didn't answer. He tried again. Did you tell me that? Silence. That was enough. I saw it in his face. The shift. Recognition. The moment someone realizes the story they've been told doesn't match reality. And once that happens, it can't be undone. The next 10 minutes felt like watching something carefully built come apart piece by piece. Uncle Ray asked about the insurance changes. One of my cousins asked whether she had touched any bank accounts. Dad admitted some bills had been redirected. Daniel looked physically sick. Aunt Denise looked like she had been waiting years for this exact moment. And Erin? Erin changed strategies. First, she was angry, then defensive. Then suddenly, the victim. "You're all attacking me," she said, her voice shaking. "I was trying to protect him." The words echoed in the room. Protect. The same word she had used from the beginning. Only now it sounded hollow. I shook my head. "This isn't protection," I said. "This is control." Her eyes filled with something colder than anger. "You're just jealous," she said. "You think you deserve the house." For a second, I almost smiled, because it was so predictable. When you're caught, accuse the other person of the very thing you were doing. "I don't care about the house," I said. "I care that Dad understands his own decisions." There was a pause. "That's the difference," I added. "One is inheritance, the other is manipulation." No one argued with that. Dinner was over. No one said it out loud. But everyone knew. Daniel stood first, grabbed his coat from the rack. "I'm leaving," he said quietly. "You can come with me, or figure out a ride later." Erin didn't move. Before he walked out, he turned to Dad. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know." Dad nodded, tired, but resolute. By the time everyone left, the house was quiet again. The turkey sat untouched. The candles had burned low. The air smelled like food and something heavier, something harder to name. I stayed, not because the dishes mattered, but because routine felt like the only thing holding the night together. We cleaned in silence for a while. Then Dad sat down at the kitchen table, looked around slowly. "Your mother would be furious," he said. "At Erin?" I asked. He gave a tired smile. "At me," he said, "for letting it go this far." I didn't respond right away, because part of me had been angry at him too. Angry that he avoided conflict, that he chose peace over clarity, that he let Erin turn his kindness into something she could use. But looking at him then, smaller somehow in his own home, the anger softened. Because underneath all of it, he had just wanted to believe his daughter was protecting him. And that kind of hope is hard to let go of. On Monday, we went to Marissa's office together. He revoked Erin's power of attorney, signed a sworn statement about the deed. And over the next few weeks, something happened that no argument could have achieved. Legal pressure, reality, consequences. Erin eventually signed documents removing her name from the house. Not willingly, not gracefully, but she did it. And after that, she disappeared. 6 months of silence. Then one message: "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I'm relieved Dad is protected." That was the truth. Things are different now. They will never be what they were before. But maybe they weren't supposed to be. Dad has support now. Real support. Not control disguised as care. We visit on separate days. Boundaries exist where blind trust used to be. They're not warm, but they're honest. And last Thanksgiving, it was just me, Dad, Aunt Denise, and a grocery store pie none of us pretended was homemade. No performance. No illusions. Just truth. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. Not the kind built on silence. The kind built on finally seeing things clearly. Because when people say family is everything, what they really mean is family reveals everything. Who protects, who manipulates, who stays quiet, and who finally speaks when staying quiet becomes its own kind of betrayal. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to play along. My name is Florence Hayes. I'm 36 years old, and until recently, I believed that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing truly collapsed without warning. I run a small plumbing business in Tampa, Florida. Service calls, water heaters, repipes, emergency leaks, a couple of small commercial accounts, if the timing lines up right. Nothing flashy, but steady. Last year, I made around $84,000 before taxes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it worked. Marcus Hale is 32. Charming in that effortless way that makes people lean toward him without realizing it. The kind of man who doesn't walk into a room. He settles into it like he's always belonged there. People didn't question Marcus. They adjusted around him. We'd been together 7 years, living together for 4. The townhouse we rented was in my name, His credit was complicated. Mine wasn't. So I handled the lease. I paid the $2,180 rent every month. Electric, internet, both phone plans, car insurance, most of the groceries. About 14 months ago, I also paid off $6,700 of his credit card debt. I remember that night clearly. He sat at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped, voice breaking, as he said he just wanted a clean start for us, and I believed him. That matters, because after that, something shifted. Money stopped being something we managed together. And slowly, quietly, it became something he measured me with. At first, it was subtle. Marcus would show me videos, women talking about soft life, about how a real partner provides without being asked. He'd send me posts about boyfriends, surprising their girlfriends with luxury gifts, spontaneous trips, designer bags. I laughed it off in the beginning. Everyone watches nonsense online. But then it stopped being content and started becoming expectation. Dinner out wasn't just dinner anymore. It was a test. A birthday gift wasn't a gesture. It was proof. If I said no to something, even for a good reason, it wasn't practical. It wasn't responsible. It meant I was cheap, unromantic, that I didn't understand his value. 2 Saturdays ago, we had dinner with his ex-girlfriend Aubrey and her boyfriend Chase at a steakhouse near downtown. Nice place. Not somewhere I would have picked on my own, but Marcus said Aubrey wanted to celebrate a promotion. So we went. I paid for our side of the bill, just under $240 before tip. Dinner was fine. Conversation was easy enough. Until dessert. Aubrey lifted her wrist, smiling as she showed off a gold designer bracelet. Chase surprised me with it, she said, almost casually, but not really. Marcus smiled at the table. But I felt it. That shift. That quiet tension settling into his shoulders. That tight smile that meant something was coming later. The drive home was silent. Too silent. We stepped inside the townhouse, and the second the door closed behind us, he exhaled sharply. Must be nice, he said. I set my keys down slowly. Nice to what? He turned to look at me, arms crossed. Nice to be with someone who doesn't make you feel embarrassed in front of your ex. I blinked. I paid for dinner. We had a good night. What exactly was the problem? The problem, he said, voice tightening, is that Aubrey never has to ask. Chase just knows. He anticipates. He provides the lifestyle she deserves. That word, deserves. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He kept going. I've been looking at this designer tote for weeks, he added. $3,900. I just wanted to see if you'd step up and do something thoughtful for once. I stared at him. Are you seriously comparing our entire relationship to a bag? No, he said flatly. I'm comparing it to standards. Then he said it. If you can't afford me, Florence, maybe you should sleep on the couch. The room went very quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. His heels clicked against the tile as he turned toward the kitchen, like he'd just won something. I watched him for a second. Are you sure that's what you want to say? I asked. He didn't even hesitate. Maybe a bad back will teach you what it feels like to disappoint someone every day. That was it. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't list the bills I paid or the debt I cleared or the things I'd quietly gone without so we could build something stable. I just said, okay. He blinked, like he hadn't expected the word to land that flat. Then he laughed. That small, dismissive laugh people use when they think they still control the room. He went upstairs, changed, grabbed his bag, and texted Aubrey from the hallway. A few minutes later, he was gone. At 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Out late, staying with Aubrey. Don't wait up. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I typed back, no problem. And I meant it. Because something inside me had already gone quiet. Not broken, not emotional, just done. I picked up my phone and called my cousin Travis. He runs a small moving company. Do you have a truck free tonight? I asked. And a couple guys who want cash work? He didn't ask questions. Give me 30 minutes. From 9:30 to about 12:45, we moved everything I had bought before Marcus or paid for myself. The sectional, the rug, the TV, the bed frame and mattress, the dining table, the bar stools, my tool chests, the cookware set my mom gave me years before I ever met him, the washer and dryer, the patio furniture, even the couch he told me to sleep on. I was careful. I photographed every room before we touched anything. Every receipt I had was already scanned in my phone. I separated his belongings, clothes, shoes, personal items, and left them neatly in the guest room and closet. I didn't want confusion. I didn't want accusations. I wanted clean. I left an air mattress in the bedroom, a folding chair in the living room, 2 plates, 2 cups, 1 lamp, and enough food in the fridge for a few days. Not out of kindness. Just Closure. On the kitchen counter, I left a note. Since I'm sleeping on the couch anyway, I figured I'd take mine. Rent is paid through the end of the month. After that, you'll need to make your own plans. At 1:08 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Still out. Don't be weird when I get back tomorrow. I didn't answer. At 1:41 a.m., he got home. At 1:43, my phone started ringing. By morning, I had 19 missed calls, 11 texts, and 3 voicemails. The first voicemail was pure screaming. The second was crying. The third was that controlled, polished voice people use when they realize rage isn't working and panic has to wear better clothes. Florence, call me back right now. We need to discuss what kind of breakdown you're having. I listened to that one twice. Not because I was hurt, because I was noticing the pattern. Even then, even after walking into an empty living room and a note on the counter, Marcus still needed the story to be that I was unstable, that I had snapped, that I was the one who had done something irrational. I waited until 8:30 a.m. to call him back. He answered on the first ring. Did you rob our house? He snapped, not even pretending to start calmly. I leaned against the counter in my mother's condo kitchen and stared out the window at the parking lot below. Palm trees shifting in the morning heat. A delivery van backing out. Ordinary things. Steady things. No, I said. I moved my property. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. You cannot just strip a shared home because your feelings got hurt. I closed my eyes for a second. On my feelings, I repeated softly. Marcus, you told me if I couldn't afford you, I should sleep on the couch. I took that seriously. It was one sentence, he shot back. One sentence after a bad night. No, I said. It was 7 years of watching money become a weapon every time you wanted to feel powerful. That sentence was just the first honest one. That made him go quiet. Only for a second. Then I heard the pivot in his voice. Softer. Injured. Almost intimate. Florence, I didn't mean it like that. Of course not. He said Aubrey had gotten in his head. He said he'd been frustrated. He said couples fight, and normal people don't disappear in the middle of the night over one comment. Normal. That word almost made me laugh. Because there is nothing normal about being told your love has to keep proving itself in receipts. There's no disappearing, I said. The rent is paid through the 30th. After that, you can apply to stay there yourself or move out. I'm not coming back. Florence. I hung up. 10 minutes later, his mother called. Denise Hale. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mostly because I wanted to hear how quickly his version had traveled. She didn't disappoint me. I need to understand what kind of cruel, humiliating stunt you think you're pulling, she said, voice already shaking with righteous fury. Marcus called me in tears. In tears. That detail sat in my chest like ice. I pictured him in the half-empty townhouse, hand to his forehead, voice breaking just enough to sound wounded. I could practically hear the performance. I moved what belongs to me, I said. You left him with nothing. I left him with his things. You trapped him financially. That phrase. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, then put it back. Excuse me? You heard me. You trapped him. You made him dependent on you, and the second he asked for more, you punished him. For a moment, I just stood there in silence, absorbing the sheer confidence of it. The way people could take years of facts and flatten them into whatever story preserved the person they loved. Respectfully, I said. I paid the rent, utilities, phones, insurance, and most of the groceries for 4 years. I also paid off his debt. That is not financial abuse. That is me refusing to be extorted in my own home. Denise gasped like I'd slapped her. Extorted is a disgusting word to use about the man you were supposed to love. Maybe, I said. Still accurate. Then I blocked her. Aubrey texted next. Real women don't humiliate their men over a joke. I stared at the screen for a long moment, reading it twice, letting the hypocrisy settle properly in my body. A joke. That was what it had become now. Not a cruel line meant to reduce me. Not a calculated test. A joke. I blocked her too. The only message that surprised me that day came from Marcus's father, Greg. Did he really say that? Just that. No accusation, no drama, no speech. I sent him a screenshot of Marcus's text from that night and a photo of the note I'd left on the counter. A minute later, Greg replied. I told him to stop playing house with money he doesn't have. I stared at that message longer than I should have, because it was the first thing that made the world feel sane again. That was the part nobody talks about when you're in a relationship like that. Not the yelling, not the ultimatums, the erosion of reality. The slow, steady way someone can make you feel unreasonable for reacting to exactly what they said, like you're unstable for bleeding where they cut you. That afternoon, a mutual friend named Kayla sent me a screenshot from Marcus's Facebook. Some women only love you when you accept less than you deserve. I looked at it for maybe 3 seconds, then locked my phone. No response, no correction, no defense. Because I was beginning to understand something important. The truth does not become stronger because you argue with a performance. Some people don't post for clarity. They post for witnesses. 2 days later, Marcus and his sister Mallory showed up at my mother's condo. They rang the bell for 5 straight minutes. Not normal ringing, not polite, the kind that says, if I can't control you, I can at least force my presence through the walls. My mother opened the storm door, but not the main one. She stood there in house slippers and a loose gray cardigan, one hand on the frame, perfectly still. My mother is not loud. She doesn't need to be. She has that rare kind of calm that makes chaos look silly. What exactly do you want? She asked through the glass. Marcus looked wrecked in a very curated way. Hoodie, messy hair, sunglasses pushed on top of his head like he hadn't slept. Mallory stood beside him with her jaw set, already angry on his behalf. I want my furniture back, Marcus said. My mother didn't blink. He didn't steal his own furniture. Mallory stepped forward immediately, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. You can't just abandon a shared residence and strip it, she said. Do you understand how terrible this is going to look in court? My mother nodded once, almost thoughtfully. Okay. That seemed to throw them off for a second. Marcus pressed his palm against the glass. Mrs. Hayes, please, can you at least tell Florence to talk to me like an adult? I was standing just out of sight in the hallway, my arms crossed so tightly they hurt. There was something almost dizzying about hearing him say that after the way he had spoken to me in my own kitchen. My mother tilted her head. She is talking like an adult, she said. That's why you don't like it. Mallory tried another angle. Police, abandonment, judges, shared property, marital optics. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, like they had stayed up half the night building a vocabulary around entitlement and calling it fairness. My mother listened. Then she said, if you feel strongly about it, do what you think you need to do, and close the door. The silence after that was thick and almost holy. I stood there in the hallway, barefoot on cool tile, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. My mother turned to look at me. You okay? I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Yeah, I said, but that wasn't fully true. I was steady. I was clear. I was not okay. Because okay would have meant none of this surprised me anymore. And part of me still couldn't believe how fast love had changed costumes. 3 days after that, I got served divorce papers in the parking lot of a plumbing supply house. It was 92 degrees. I remember that because the heat hit like a wall when I stepped outside carrying a box of fittings, and then a man I'd never seen before said, Florence Hayes? I knew before he handed me the envelope. My stomach dropped anyway. I stood beside my truck and read the first few pages with sweat crawling down my spine and the sun glaring off the windshield. Marcus was asking for half the value of everything in the home. Temporary support of $1,100 a month, a share of my business account, legal fees, and reimbursement for emotional distress caused by reckless financial deprivation. I read that line twice, then a third time, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so nakedly obvious now. This wasn't about repair, wasn't about regret, wasn't even about being hurt. It was about money. Money and punishment. Money and control. Money as revenge for the fact that, for once, I had not stayed in the room and defended myself until I was exhausted enough to hand it over. I folded the papers carefully, set the box in my truck bed, and got in behind the wheel. For a long second, I just sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I thought about the first year with Marcus, how easy he had felt then, how warm, how admired. I thought about the kitchen table where he had cried over debt. The vacations we didn't take because we were supposed to be rebuilding. The new work trailer I postponed buying because I wanted us to have an emergency cushion. The nights I lay awake, doing mental math, while he slept peacefully beside me. And I thought about that sentence. If you can't afford me, sleep on the couch. It sounded different now. Cleaner, less like an insult, more like a confession. Not of what I lacked, of what he believed love was for. I started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot, and called an attorney. Because once those papers hit my hands, I knew exactly what this had become. Not heartbreak. War. I hired an attorney 2 days later. Her name was Shannon Reyes. Calm, precise. The kind of woman who didn't raise her voice because she didn't need to. The first thing she said to me, after I finished explaining everything, was simple. Even when you're right, she said, folding her hands neatly on the desk, you still need documents. Feelings don't win cases. Paper does. I nodded. Good, I said. I have paper. And I did. Lease agreement in my name, receipts for the sectional, the TV, the bed, the dining table, the washer and dryer, the patio furniture, my tool storage. Photos from my old apartment 3 years before Marcus, showing half of that same furniture already in place. Bank statements showing I paid nearly every major bill. Screenshots of texts. The moving invoice from Travis. The storage contract. Everything was there. Organized. Clear. Undeniable. For the first time since that night, I felt something close to control again. Not emotional control, but structural control, the kind built on facts, not reactions. Shannon flipped through the folder slowly, nodding once or twice. "This is good," she said. "Very good." I should have felt relieved. But that was the moment things got worse. Marcus didn't step back. He escalated. The first call came from one of my commercial clients, a property manager I'd worked with for almost 2 years. "Florence," he said, voice careful in that way people use when they're trying not to offend but already halfway out the door. "I just wanted to check in. We received a call from someone claiming to be your partner." My grip tightened on the phone. "And?" I asked. "They said you were going through some kind of personal situation, that there might be issues with your billing, that we should be cautious moving forward." There it was. Not loud. Not explosive. Just a quiet, targeted cut at the place that mattered most. "My billing is fine," I said evenly. "I figured," he replied quickly, "but we're going to hold off on the repipe job scheduled for Friday, just until things settle." $5,800. Gone. Not because I failed. Because someone decided to make my life unstable enough that it looked like failure. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. For a second, I felt something sharp rise in my chest. Anger. Not loud. Not explosive. Just focused. I forwarded the call log and email to Shannon. Her response came 15 minutes later. A formal letter was sent to Marcus that same afternoon. Cease and desist. Interference with business. Documented. Added to the case file. He didn't stop. He filed a police report 2 days later. Claimed I had stolen shared property. A grandmother's dining set that didn't exist. Jewelry that was still in his possession. I almost admired the audacity of it. Almost. 2 officers showed up at my mother's condo that evening. I invited them in. Calmly. No defensiveness, no attitude. Just facts. I handed them a folder. Walked them through everything. Receipts, photos, lease, inventory list, screenshots. Even ring camera footage from the townhouse showing Marcus entering the house after I left, with his own key. They listened. Flipped pages. Exchanged a glance. One of them nodded slowly and said exactly what I already knew. Civil matter. That was the end of that. But not the end of him. The next shift came during financial discovery. Shannon requested Marcus's disclosures. I didn't expect much. Maybe some exaggeration, maybe a few omissions. I was wrong. He had opened new debt, quietly, without saying a word. A $4,900 store card, a $3,200 personal loan, about $2,100 spread across buy now, pay later apps. Another credit card sitting at roughly $4,400, just under $14,600, hidden. The statements told the story clearly. Boutique purchases, salon packages, a weekend in Miami with Aubrey, monthly payments on things I had never even seen. I sat at Shannon's desk, staring at the printed pages, and felt something strange settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, that was already gone. Something colder. Clarity. He had been calling me cheap. While quietly financing a life he couldn't afford, he had been measuring me, while hiding the fact that he was drowning. And somehow I had still been the one trying to build stability. That realization didn't hurt. It ended something. A few days later, Greg called me. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Tired. "I'm not calling to get involved," he said. "I'm calling because he's lying to everyone." I didn't interrupt. "I told him to stop pushing you," Greg continued. "To stop turning money into a game. He didn't listen." There was a pause. Then he added, quieter, "I'm sending you something." A minute later, my phone buzzed. Screenshots. A family group chat I wasn't part of. Marcus's name at the top. One message stood out immediately. "He'll cave like always. I just needed to scare her a little." I read it once. Then again, slowly, carefully, like if I rushed it, I might misunderstand. But there was nothing to misunderstand. No nuance. No hidden meaning. Just control. Plain, unapologetic. I forwarded the screenshots to Shannon. For the first time since I met her, she almost smiled. "This," she said, tapping the paper lightly, "is useful." Marcus still didn't stop. His counteroffer came a week later. $28,000. 18 months of support at $900 a month. Half the emergency savings. A payout for loss of standard of living. I read it without reacting. Because by then, I understood something important. He wasn't negotiating. He was trying to recreate the same system. Pressure. Demand. Payment in exchange for peace. He even showed up at one of my job sites. Full makeup. Heels. White blouse. Like he was going to brunch instead of standing in the lobby of a commercial property surrounded by contractors in steel-toe boots. Reception called me. "There's someone here asking for you," the woman said carefully. "She says she's your partner." I closed my eyes for a second. "Don't let him pass the desk," I said. "I'll come down." I wanted witnesses. I stepped into the lobby and saw him immediately. Perfect posture. Tearful eyes. Composed chaos. The moment he saw me, the performance started. "Aw, you ruined my life over a purse," he said loudly, voice cracking just enough to carry. A couple of guys near the vending machines turned to look. I walked toward him slowly. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined your life because you thought I would stay scared." His expression snapped for half a second. Just a flicker. Then it came back. Anger this time. Sharp. Close. "Stop acting superior," he hissed under his breath. "All you have to do is send me $2,400 so I can catch up on the SUV. Then we can calm everything down." There it was. Again. Money in exchange for peace. The same structure. The same expectation. Just louder now. I looked at him for a long second. Not with anger. Not with sadness. With recognition. Then I turned to building security. "Please walk him out." His face changed again. This time, not into anger, into something uglier. Exposure. That night, Mallory called from a new number. "You're petty," she said immediately. "Cruel. Obsessed with winning." I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. "Knight, this was never about winning," I said. "It was about ending a system where every argument ended with my wallet open." She scoffed. Hung up. I blocked the number. And for the first time in months, I slept. Straight through the night. No mental calculations. No quiet anxiety about what the next request would be. No rehearsing explanations in my head. Just silence. And in that silence, I realized something else. Without the constant pressure to prove my worth financially, I had money left at the end of the month. Actual money. I wasn't drowning. I had never been drowning. I had just been carrying someone who wanted me to feel guilty for not carrying more. By the time mediation was scheduled, something inside me had completely shifted. Not hardened. Not closed. Just clear. Whatever this had been, whatever I thought it was at the beginning, it wasn't love anymore. Maybe it never had been. Because love doesn't need leverage. And it doesn't come with invoices. The divorce finalized a little over 3 months after that dinner. Mediation was the turning point. I remember walking into that room and seeing Marcus already seated across the table. For a second, it felt like stepping into a different version of him. He was dressed conservatively. Soft colors, hair pulled back neatly, no sharp edges, no tension in his posture. Even his expression had changed, subdued, almost fragile. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it. That was the most unsettling part. Not the lies. The adaptability. The way he could reshape himself depending on the audience. His argument, when it started, was calm, measured. He said he had felt emotionally neglected, that he had spoken harshly in the heat of the moment, that I had overreacted in a way that destabilized him financially. He didn't raise his voice once, didn't accuse, didn't attack. He just positioned himself carefully inside a story where he was reasonable, and I was extreme. Shannon let him talk, didn't interrupt, didn't react. She just waited. Then when it was her turn, she opened the file, and everything changed. She started with the numbers, my income, his income, the rent, utilities, phone plans, insurance, groceries, the $6,700 in debt I had paid off for him. Line by line, she built the structure. Then came the percentages, 82%. That was what I had been covering every month for years. Marcus's expression didn't change at first, but his hands did. They tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Then she moved to their next section, the hidden debt. $14,600. Store cards, personal loans, installment apps, credit accounts, all opened without my knowledge. All active while he was calling me cheap, while he was measuring me, while he was asking for more. That was the first visible crack. His jaw shifted. Barely, but enough. Then Shannon placed the screenshots on the table. Greg's messages, the group chat. He'll cave like always. I just needed to scare her a little. The room went quiet, not tense, not explosive. Just still, because there was nothing left to interpret. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding, just intent. Clear, deliberate, controlled. From that point on, the version of events Marcus had built started to collapse. Not dramatically, not all at once. piece by piece. His claims about emotional neglect, countered with financial records. His accusations of instability, countered with documentation. His narrative of abandonment, countered with proof of sustained responsibility. Even the interference with my business came up. The calls, the pulled contract, the letter Shannon had sent, then the police report, false claims, non-existent items. Everything was there, structured, verified, real. By the time we reached the end of mediation, the room felt different. Not because anyone had raised their voice, because the truth had nowhere left to move. His demands started to fall away. First the alimony, then the share of my business, then the claims against my tools, my truck, my accounts. Even the inflated valuation of the furniture disappeared. What remained was small, real, final. The settlement was simple. Marcus received $6,500 from shared savings and tax return funds. He kept his personal belongings and the guest room furniture. I kept my business, my truck, my tools, my premarital assets, everything I had built. We each paid our own legal fees. When it was over, I didn't feel victorious. I felt quiet, like something loud had finally stopped. The total cost to me, between legal fees, the lost job, moving expenses, storage, and the security deposit I never got back, was just over $19,000. An expensive lesson, still cheaper than staying. Marcus moved in with Denise and Mallory. Last I heard, the SUV he had been so desperate about was refinanced in Denise's name because he couldn't qualify on his own. As for Aubrey, the bracelet, the one that started half of this. Apparently, Chase had bought it on store financing at a ridiculous interest rate, and they had been arguing about money ever since. That part made me laugh, more than it should have, because it wasn't really about them. It was about the pattern, the illusion, the performance of a life that looks expensive from the outside and unstable underneath. Me, I rented a one-bedroom in South Tampa. Nothing fancy. Clean. Quiet. Mine. I set it up exactly how I wanted. No negotiations. No silent expectations attached to every purchase. Just space. And for the first time in a long time, that space felt like peace. Work stabilized too. Not immediately, but steadily. I picked up 2 new maintenance accounts that replaced the one I lost. Without the constant drain, the constant pressure, I could think clearly again. Plan properly. Build instead of react. And yes, a few weeks after everything finalized, I started seeing someone. His name is Daniel, 37. Works as a physical therapist. Funny in a way that doesn't try too hard. Calm. Grounded. The first time we went out, I paid for dinner. He bought the movie tickets. No speech. No test. No invisible scoreboard tracking who had done more. Just normal. At first, that felt strange. Almost suspicious. Like I was waiting for the moment it would turn into something else. But it didn't. It just stayed simple. And I realized how unfamiliar that had become. The biggest thing I learned from all of this isn't complicated. It was never really about a purse, or a couch, or one cruel sentence in a kitchen. It was about power, about whether fear could control my wallet, whether shame could make me pay, whether love could be turned into an invoice. Because once money becomes the language of control in a relationship, the relationship is already ending. I don't mind providing. I mind being threatened. I don't mind generosity. I mind it being demanded like proof. He told me if I couldn't afford him, I should sleep on the couch. Turns out, I could afford peace just fine. I just had to stop paying for disrespect. My name is Juliet Sinclair. I'm 33 years old, and until this summer, I believe that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing truly collapsed without warning. I work as a senior estimator for a construction firm just outside Charlotte. My days are structured, not rigid, just deliberate. I wake up at the same time every morning, leave the house at 8, stop at the same coffee shop where they already know my order. By 6, I'm usually home unless a project slips. Evenings are simple. The gym, or quiet dinners, or sitting on my balcony with a book I actually finish. 3 years ago, I signed the lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in South End. It was mine before it became ours, before Marcus. Marcus Hale is 29. Charming in a way that feels effortless. The kind of man who doesn't enter a room. He settles into it like he's always belonged there. People don't question him. They orbit him. In the beginning, that felt magnetic. By year 3, it felt exhausting. Every dinner became a photo opportunity. Every small disagreement turned into a story retold to his friends with just enough distortion to make him look misunderstood and me look intense. Somewhere along the way, our relationship stopped feeling like something we lived in and started feeling like something he performed. I ignored it longer than I should have. Things shifted harder after he started his new job. New coworkers, new bars, new conversations about reinventing himself. He still said he loved me, but he talked about our future like it was something optional, like a jacket he wasn't sure still fit. The night it ended, or what he called a break, was a Thursday. We were sitting at this taco place we used to go to when we were broke and stupidly happy. Halfway through dinner, Marcus put his drink down and said he needed to be honest. That's never a good sentence. He looked at me like he was about to do something brave. I think I need a break to find myself, he said. I've never really been single as an adult. I need space, to breathe, to see what else is out there before I lock myself into something forever. I stared at him for a second. Then I asked, "Are you breaking up with me?" He tilted his head, almost amused. "Why are you making it sound so harsh? I'm asking for space. If we're meant to be, we'll find our way back." And that was the moment something in me went still, because I understood exactly what he was asking. He wanted the safety of me, with the freedom to explore everyone else. He wanted me waiting while he decided if I was still his best option. So I nodded. "Take all the time you need." He blinked. That wasn't the reaction he expected. I paid my half of the bill, stood up, and told him I'd be home within the hour. "Juliet, don't be dramatic," he said. "I'm not," I replied. "You asked for a break. I'm agreeing." When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't sit in the dark replaying the conversation. I started packing his things. Not angrily, methodically. Shirts folded, shoes paired, chargers bundled so he couldn't accuse me later of hiding anything. I moved with the same precision I used at work, step by step, no wasted motion. At 1:04 a.m., he texted, "I'm at Kelsey's. We just need a few days to clear our heads." I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "I'm treating this as a breakup. Your things will be ready for pickup tomorrow afternoon." The response came almost immediately. "You're proving my point." I actually laughed. His version of love was me staying available no matter what he said. My version apparently was taking him seriously. The next morning, my friend Trevor came over with coffee and helped me move the heavier boxes closer to the door. Around noon, Marcus showed up with Kelsey, and that look people get when reality has moved faster than they expected. He stepped inside slowly, scanning the apartment. "You really packed everything," he said. "Yes." "So, 3 years is just over?" I met his eyes. "No, you ended it last night. I accepted it today." Kelsey stepped in like she was managing a situation. "Juliet, he didn't mean it like that," she said. "He just needs space. He wants to know you care enough to fight for him." I looked at her, then back at Marcus. "I'm not auditioning for my own relationship." That landed exactly how you'd expect. Marcus's expression shifted. Confusion, then anger. "You're being cold," he said. I was being honest. Healthy couples take breaks. "Healthy couples also respect the answer they get," I replied. They loaded his bags into Kelsey's SUV in silence. At the car, Marcus turned back. "You're really not going to chase me, are you?" "No." That night, I changed the door code, dropped his spare key with the front desk, notified management he was no longer authorized for guest access. Then I made dinner, watched a game, and slept straight through the night. That surprised me the most. Not happiness. Just quiet. 4 days later, Marcus was still acting like the breakup was a mood I should have outgrown by now. The first message didn't even come from him. It came from Kelsey. New number. "She thought you'd realize what you were losing by now." I read it once, then typed back exactly one sentence. He's the one who asked for a break. I didn't block the number. I didn't engage again either. Silence, I was learning, said more than arguments ever could. Later that afternoon, Marcus's sister, Emily, sent me a message on Instagram. Her tone was softer, more careful. "She hasn't been eating. She's barely sleeping. I'm worried about her." That one I didn't ignore, but I also didn't play along. I called Denise, Marcus's mother. She'd always been the only person in his family who spoke without performance. "If Marcus is actually in danger," I told her calmly, "please go be with him. But if this is just pressure to get me to respond, I'm not participating." There was a pause on the line, a long one. Then Denise sighed, like someone who already understood more than she wanted to admit. "I'll check on him," she said quietly. That same evening, Marcus started posting again. Stories from bars in Nashville. A mirror selfie with a caption about choosing himself. A blurry photo of a woman's hand across a table. A white heart beside it. It didn't make me jealous. It made me tired. So I did the opposite. I went running again. Rejoined the Wednesday fitness class I dropped because Marcus said it cut into our time. Cleaned the apartment, boxed up the framed photos of us, and slid them into the back of the closet. None of it felt dramatic. It felt administrative. That Saturday, Trevor dragged me to a river cleanup event in Freedom Park. His company sponsored it, and he refused to spend 3 hours picking up trash alone. I almost didn't go, but staying home felt too close to thinking. So I went, and that's where I met Daniel. Daniel Carter was 32. He wore a faded baseball cap, work gloves that were clearly too big for him, and a smile that didn't try too hard to exist. The first thing he said to me was after my trash bag split open and sent crushed cans rolling down a small slope. He looked at the mess, then at me, and said, "Strong opening." I laughed before I could stop myself, and just like that, something shifted. We ended up working the same stretch of trail, then standing near the coffee cart with Trevor and one of Daniel's friends. Conversation with him wasn't strategic. There were no pauses that felt calculated, no moments where I felt like I was being evaluated. He was just present. I didn't ask for his number. 2 nights later, Trevor sent me a screenshot from the volunteer group chat. Daniel had asked if the woman with the calm voice and the serious eyes was single. I told Trevor that description was rude. Then I asked for Daniel's number. Meanwhile, Marcus got stranger. I ran into him Tuesday morning at the coffee shop near my building. He acted surprised. Too surprised. He asked how I'd been sleeping, whether I still got oat milk in my coffee. "I'm fine," I said, and left. That night, he was sitting outside my apartment. Wearing my old gray college hoodie like Heartbreak came with a costume department. He stood when he saw me. "Can we not do this in the hall?" he asked. "We can also not do it in my apartment," I replied. He exhaled, frustrated. "I just needed to see your face. Everyone's acting like this is final." "It is final." He stared at me like I'd said something unreasonable. "Over one conversation?" "No," I said quietly. "Over what that conversation meant." And then he said the one thing that erased whatever softness I still had left. "I thought you'd at least wait a little while." There it was. Not regret. Expectation. He wanted to test the world while I stayed exactly where he left me. I met his eyes. "You don't get to leave me on standby." His expression cracked. Not into sadness, but into something louder, more performative. His voice rose, his breathing shifted. I'd already texted Erica at the front desk from the elevator. By the time Marcus started pushing the moment into something bigger, Erica stepped in. "Sir," she said firmly, "if you're not a resident or registered guest, I need you to head downstairs." Marcus looked offended, like he'd been disrespected. He left without another word. I went inside, closed the door, and stood there for a moment in the quiet. Then I picked up my phone and texted Daniel. "Do you want dinner Thursday?" He replied in less than 3 minutes. Yes. That felt more honest than anything I'd had in months. 3 weeks later, dinner had turned into walks through the park. Walks turned into Sunday brunch, then midweek coffee, then something steady, something easy. Daniel didn't punish closeness. If he was late, he told me. If I had a long day, he asked about it without turning it into a performance. There were no games, just consistency. By week 3, Marcus had apparently realized something. I wasn't just serious. I was moving on. That's when the calls started. Unknown numbers at first, then a blocked voicemail at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. His voice came through softer than I'd ever heard it. "I know you're home. Your balcony light is on. I just want 5 minutes." I saved the voicemail immediately. The next morning, he showed up at my office. Our receptionist called upstairs. "There's a man in the lobby with a bakery box," she said carefully. "He says he's your boyfriend." "Ex-boyfriend," I corrected. "Please don't send him up." He left before security intervened. But he left the box. Inside were pastries from the place we used to go on Sundays. And a note. For the woman I'm still in love with. I took a photo, emailed it to myself, then left the box in the break room. That night, Daniel and I met Trevor and his wife at a rooftop concert in Noda. It was simple, easy, exactly the kind of night Marcus used to complain was too low effort. We were halfway through the second set when I saw him, standing near the bar, watching. Later, Trevor's wife told me she'd spotted Kelsey near the entrance, filming something on her phone. Someone had seen I was tagged at the concert. Someone had told him where to find me. Marcus walked straight toward us, and instead of looking at me first, he looked at Daniel. "So this is why you moved on so fast." Daniel didn't react. He just glanced at me, steady, waiting. I stepped forward. Marcus, leave." He laughed under his breath. "Wow, 3 years, and now I'm just Marcus." Daniel spoke then, calm but firm. "She asked you to leave." Marcus's smile shifted, sharpened. "She told you I'm the crazy ex, didn't she?" he said, looking at Daniel. "She always has to be the calm one." I moved between them. "Leave." Marcus reached for my wrist. Not aggressively, but enough. Trevor stepped in. Daniel moved closer. Security arrived within seconds. Marcus tried to switch tactics. Softer voice, controlled breathing. I just want closure, he said. You're humiliating me. Security didn't care. They walked him out while he kept calling my name like volume could rewrite reality. When it was over, Daniel looked at me. Is this your normal Thursday? He asked slightly. I let out a breath. No, definitely not. He nodded once. Good, because I like you, he said. But I don't do unfinished stories. Neither did I. And for the first time, that felt like the right kind of boundary. 2 days after the concert, Denise called me. Not defensive, not emotional, just tired. I need the truth, she said, because none of the versions I'm hearing make sense anymore. So I gave it to her. Everything. The restaurant, the hallway, the office visit, the voicemail, the concert. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't soften it either. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then she said quietly, he told us you were punishing him for asking for space. I leaned back against my kitchen counter. He didn't tell you he's been following me around the city? Another pause. Longer this time. No, she said. He did not. I closed my eyes for a second, then spoke carefully. I'm not trying to ruin Marcus. I just want distance. Denise exhaled slowly. Then you need to make it formal, she said, because he's not hearing you. She was right. So I did. $425 later, a local attorney named Grant sent a cease and desist letter. Certified mail, email, every documented incident listed clearly. Calls, workplace visit, apartment confrontation, public disruption. No direct contact. No third-party contact. No showing up uninvited. It was clear. It was final. And for 3 days, it worked. Nothing. No messages, no calls, no coincidental appearances. I almost thought it was over. Then Daniel sent me a screenshot. A blank Instagram account had requested to follow him. The bio read, ask her how fast she replaced me. I stared at the screen, then forwarded it to Grant without replying. Grant forwarded it to Marcus. And just like that, silence again. Not peaceful silence. Controlled silence. The kind that feels like someone is holding their breath on the other side of a door. For a while, that was enough. The noise stopped. And without it, something else became clearer. What life actually sounded like when it wasn't filled with tension. Daniel and I kept things slow. We cooked dinner at my apartment, watched bad movies, and didn't pretend they were good. He left a toothbrush by my sink one night without turning it into a moment. And somehow, that small, ordinary thing felt more intimate than anything Marcus had ever turned into a production. Work got better, too. In the middle of all of it, I got promoted. Senior estimator, salary bump, more responsibility. Trevor claimed emotional chaos had been blocking my professional aura. I told him if he said aura again, I'd end the friendship. For a while, everything settled, until it didn't. 2 months after the breakup, I was standing in county court on a Wednesday morning. Because Marcus broke the agreement, he mailed a handwritten letter to my office, marked personal. Inside was a Polaroid from a mountain trip we'd taken years ago. On the back, one sentence. You don't throw away real love this easily. Grant looked at it once and nodded. Perfect, he said. Now we file. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry either. Just done. So we filed for a civil no-contact order. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Because the evidence wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. Grant had everything organized, tabbed, documented. The messages, the voicemail transcript, the building report from Erica, the bakery note, the concert incident, the cease and desist, the fake account, the letter. Marcus showed up looking softened, cream sweater, neutral expression, carefully curated. His attorney spoke first. My client simply wanted closure after a painful separation. Grant slid the voicemail transcript across the table. Then the screenshots. Then the letter. The judge read through everything quietly. Then looked at Marcus. When she told you not to contact her, he said, and then her attorney told you not to contact her, what part of that sounded negotiable? Marcus's composure broke. He said he loved me. That Daniel was a rebound, that I had moved on too fast, that he never meant for a break to become permanent. The judge listened, then said something I think about more than I expected to. Intent does not cancel impact. And just like that, it was over. 1 year no contact order. No calls, no messages, no showing up, no using other people to reach me. Nothing. Outside the courtroom, Denise was waiting. She looked older than I remembered. I'm sorry, she said, for all of it. I shook my head gently. You don't owe me anything. She nodded, then added quietly, I liked who he was when he was with you, before he started treating love like leverage. That line stayed with me. Love like leverage. That was exactly it. Marcus didn't lose me because he needed space. He lost me because he expected me to wait while he decided if I was worth choosing. Daniel never asked me to wait. He just asked if I was free Friday night. And somehow, that difference changed everything. We're still together, slowly, intentionally. Most nights we cook at my place, talk about nothing important, laugh at things that don't need to be shared with anyone else. His toothbrush is still by my sink, and that quiet, ordinary detail feels more real than any grand gesture I used to mistake for love. As for Marcus, from what I've heard, he tells people two different stories. In one, I'm cold, unforgiving. In the other, I'm the one he'll never get over. Neither version is my responsibility, because the truth is simpler than both. Love isn't waiting while someone explores their options. It isn't proving your worth by staying through uncertainty. It isn't being placed on standby. Real love is smaller than that. It's clarity. It's consistency. It's someone choosing you, without needing to lose you first.